Dora went blind the day her stepmother dipped her 2 fingers into her eyes, and her melodious voice made a river god fall in love with her. Dora's mother died when she was 12, leaving her with her father, and a year later, she also lost her father. Her father had married her mother and his second wife just a few months apart, and Dora had a stepsister who was 2 months older than her. Dora was maltreated by her stepmother and her children, and she was the only one doing things around the house, without anyone's help. One of the things she loved doing most was going to the river to fetch water. There at the river, she composed songs about her situation at that moment, and sang them with joy, but most times with pain. She got so used to the river that she sometimes sneaked out just to go there and sing, because each time her stepmother caught her singing around the house, it was always double punishment. After singing, she would sneak back to the house to complete her chores. Dora was beaten to a stupor one day for not cleaning her stepmother's room because she was busy with other chores. She needed to put how she was feeling into a song, so she sneaked out of the house when she was cooking, thinking that she would be back early. However, she got delayed by a handsome hunter whom she met by the river. He enjoyed her song so much that he made a fire and roasted his catch for them to eat right there. When Dora remembered she had something on fire, it was already so late, but she sprinted back to the house. When she got to the kitchen, the food in the pot was missing, but the burnt part was still there in the pot. With both hands on her head, Dora started to cry. Her stepmother noticed she was around and came out of the house holding a cane. She dipped 2 fingers into Dora's eyes and then flogged her without mercy. After she was done flogging her, Dora could no longer see anything. Dora became blind and was no longer allowed to do anything. She wasn't even given food. All she did was sit beside the house, soaked in her tears during the day, and at night, she would find her way back into the house to sleep. The neighbor's little son used to come each day to give Dora food without her stepmother's notice. One day, Dora had to beg him to take her to the river, and when he did, she asked him to return home and come back later to take her home. Dora could feel the serenity, so she managed to sit by the river and started pouring out her heart in a song. All of a sudden, she heard something so mighty come out of the river, and she paused immediately. She was so frightened that she began to shiver. "Who is it?" Dora asked in a trembling tone. And then, something pierced through her eyeballs, and all of a sudden, she could see. She saw this shiny image standing in the river, still dancing. Dora struggled to get up on seeing the shiny image that was still in the water, dancing seriously. It was the image of a fair-complexioned, middle-aged man with very long hair. He had a beautiful gold-colored robe on. His robe was so shiny as he danced slowly to her song, as well as his skin. She staggered backward, and then finally regained her balance. She stood there, paused, with her mouth agape, still trying to comprehend what was going on, but everything seemed like a dream. Dora had stopped singing, but this image wouldn't stop dancing. She tiptoed backward quietly before racing out of there, but her bubble burst when she stepped on a small piece of wood that broke, making a very loud sound. The image paused as soon as he heard the sound, and all of a sudden he turned, now staring at her. He stretched forth his arm towards her, and immediately, she could no longer see. "Help!" Dora started to scream, turning left and then right, but she paused as soon as she remembered that she was standing by a river, and she took a few more steps backward in order not to drown. "Help!" she continued screaming, but no one was around or heard her. Dora became so scared and was visibly shaking. She had a stick in her hand, which she used to identify clear pathways at home. She still held onto it. It was like her second eye. She stretched it forth, swinging it from side to side to be sure there were no obstacles of any kind before her. And she began to walk slowly out of there. "Help!" She screamed again, but heard no response. She continued walking slowly again, like a baby who was learning how to walk, still swinging her stick from side to side. Dora walked for almost half an hour, still screaming for help, but she saw no one. When she noticed she was walking deep into the bush, she decided to sit somewhere with her stick stretched forth, and she began to cry. She paused when she started to hear someone's footsteps from afar off, and she started to swing her stick from side to side again. "Who is there?" Dora asked in a trembling tone, but the person did not respond, which made her more frightened. "I say, who is there?" she asked again, now struggling to get up, thinking it was the image she saw in the water. "Calm down, dear friend. When I heard the beautiful song from afar, I knew it was no other person than you," the voice said. "Please, who are you?" Dora queried. "Your friend, the hunter," he said, and she became relieved. They exchanged pleasantries, and he came forth, grabbed her shoulders, and then made her sit back on the ground. "I have been coming around since the last time we met at the river, but I haven't been seeing you. What happened to you? Did you lose your sight or something?" he probed, and Dora nodded. "Please, what happened?" he asked, and then she sighed. "It's a long story," Dora said, with tears dripping down. "Please, can you share it?" Dora sighed again, and then she narrated everything to him. He felt deeply sorry and assured her that she was going to see again someday. She smiled and thanked him for at least giving her a little hope. The hunter made a fire and again roasted his catch for them to eat. They talked about many things, and he told her some jokes which made her laugh so hard, forgetting her sorrows for a while. After a few hours, Dora told him she needed to return home, even though her stepmother and her children didn't even care about her existence. He asked her the name of her village for the first time, and she told him. He said he was from the neighbouring village, but his grandmother was from Dora's village. All these they hadn't discussed the last time they met, because all he cared about was her song and her voice, and all she cared about was the catch he had in the fire, as the last time she ate meat was when her father was alive. They arrived at Dora's village, and they stopped a few houses from hers, following her instructions. The hunter bade her farewell, not knowing that Dora's stepsister had been watching them. Dora managed to walk home slowly, and as soon as she stepped in, she was welcomed with strokes of cane. She cried out so loud following each stroke of the cane. She couldn't see, so she didn't even know where to run to. The fear of falling if she tried to run made her succumb to their torture, as her stepmother's children were with her cheering her on. Dora fell on her knees, begging God to do something, while the strokes landing on her body brought nothing but deep pain as she knelt there, rubbing her body and saying silent prayers. "Leave her alone," Dora heard all of a sudden. It was the voice of Mama Nana, their neighbour. But Dora's stepmother ignored her and continued flogging her. Mama Nana had to push her aside. "You pushed me away!" Dora's stepmother kept on screaming, but Mama Nana ignored her and started pulling Dora up. "Mama Nana, don't try that thing you're about to do or I'll flog both of you," Dora heard her stepmother say. "Try it and see if you and your children won't spend the night in the police cell," Mama Nana threatened, which made Dora's stepmother keep quiet. Mama Nana took Dora to her house, bathed her, and then gave her food. Dora hadn't bathed for some time since the incident occurred, which made her lose her sight. Who would even keep water for her to bathe with? Her stepmother or her children? After they chatted for a while, Mama Nana combed Dora's unkempt hair. After a few hours, she took Dora home, threatening her stepmother and her children that she would get them arrested if they laid their hands on Dora again. Dora felt a bit relieved. The following day, Dora was at her usual spot, where she used to sit beside the house, thinking about what was gradually becoming of her when she felt someone's presence. Goosebumps filled her entire body, and she immediately picked up her stick and swung it from side to side. "Who is that?" Dora asked. "Don't be afraid, is this where you live?" the voice asked slowly. It was a man's voice, and it wasn't a familiar one at all, yet it already sounded like that of one who knew her. "Who are you?" Dora probed again, curious for an answer. "I am," he said, and then paused. Dora was wondering what made him pause, and was about to ask him if he was still there when she started to hear footsteps marching forth. "Dora, it's obvious that your blindness is beginning to affect your brain. Why did you mess up the toilet like that?" her stepsister raged. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I had a running stomach and I couldn't locate the pit, so I had to do it on the floor when it was about to drop on me. But I cleaned it up," Dora said with a grin. They were using a pit toilet and it was quite difficult for her to locate the pit. "With my mother's favorite piece of rag?" her stepsister questioned in a very harsh tone. Please, I'm sorry. I'll wash it once I'm done with this stranger here," Dora said, pointing towards the direction where the man's voice had come from. "Which stranger?" her stepsister quizzed. "The man standing there. Or has he gone?" Dora asked, turning towards the direction where her sister's voice came from. "You're definitely not okay," her stepsister hissed, and then walked away. "How come? When did he go?" Dora muttered to herself. "I'm here," the stranger said. "But..." Dora began, but she again started hearing her sister's voice coming towards her. "Very foolish human being. Who do you think will clean up your mess and then wash up the piece of rag you used?" her stepsister said, still coming forth. She approached and then rubbed Dora's face with the piece of rag Dora had used to clean up her mess. Dora didn't know it was her stepmother's rag when she used it. She thought it was one of her clothes she had left on the line because she had picked it from there, and after she was done, she had thrown it in the bush. "I hope you like the smell of your own mess?" her stepsister questioned, hissed, and then walked away again. Dora's face was oozing so badly that she started throwing up, and then she began to cry. "Who is she?" the stranger quizzed. "You're still here? Please, who are you?" Dora managed to ask while still sobbing. "My name is Neon." "Who is she?" he questioned again. "Neon? From where?" Dora asked. "Well, she's my stepsister," she added, cleaning her face with the cloth she had on. Neon sighed. "You haven't answered me. From where?" Dora managed to ask again amid tears. And then her step-siblings approached, laughing so hard. Dora was already so scared, thinking they were coming to her. "Please leave her alone. Let's go to the river before Mama comes back," one of them said. "Thank God," Dora whispered to herself. After they left, Dora asked the stranger again where he came from, but there was no response. It was when she asked repeatedly without an answer that she knew he had left. Well, her step-siblings arrived about an hour later, telling their mother, who had already returned from where she went, about the mysterious thing that they had witnessed. The river the villagers fetched water from even before they were born, had suddenly dried up before their eyes. The river dried up before their very eyes. How? Dora sat there questioning herself. Immediately, her stepmother ran past her while her children followed. What's going on? How can the river just dry up like that? Dora asked, but none of them cared to answer. They returned about an hour later, seriously lamenting. Their mother asked them if it was an atrocity they had committed by the river that caused it to dry up. But they said they had done nothing. So how come other people can see the river, even fetching from it, but we can't? Is there something you children are not telling me? I am finished. Dora's stepmother continued lamenting until she burst into tears. Dora became so scared and confused. Is it that the gods are angry with us or what? She asked rhetorically. Can someone talk to me, please? What's going on? She probed, but they all ignored her. Villagers started gathering in numbers in their compound to confirm the rumor that was already flying around the village, and Dora's stepmother and siblings wouldn't stop explaining to everyone what had happened and what was happening. Later, the king of their village summoned Dora's stepmother and her children, and they went to the palace, leaving Dora all alone in the house. After they returned, they still kept mute, without saying a word to Dora. It was the following day, when their neighbor's son came to visit Dora, that he told her that the chief priest had asked her stepmother and her children never to go close to the river again, and that her stepmother should amend her ways. The priest said that she and her children had offended the water god, and the only way not to incur his wrath further was to stay far away from the river. Dora's stepmother and her children started going to the neighboring village to fetch water. They were the only ones in the village who dared not go close to the village river. As a result of what happened, things became extremely difficult for Dora. Before then, they used to fetch a full small cup of water for her to drink throughout the day. But when they started going to the neighboring village for water, no one cared about her any longer, and she started going to their neighbors, begging them for water. One day, Dora was very thirsty, and on that particular day, none of their neighbors were around. She continued roaming about in their neighborhood in tears, swinging her stick from side to side, screaming at the top of her voice for water. But some who her stepmother had brainwashed heard her but refused to give. She roamed about until she missed her way, until a good Samaritan brought her back home. How long have you been blind? He asked, sitting her on her mat. A few months ago, Dora said, wiping her tears with the hem of the cloth she was wearing. What if I take you somewhere so you can see again? He quizzed, stroking her hair, but she immediately withdrew her head. But I don't even know who you are, Dora said, sitting up. It's me, Neon. Neon? Wait, you were the one who came here the other day, right? Dora asked, pointing in his direction. Wait, were you, or are you invisible? How come my sister did not see you? You're right, and no, I'm not invisible. She's only blind within, he said. How do you mean? Where exactly are you from, and how and when did you leave here the other day? Dora questioned. You will find out soon. Come, let's go. Let me take you to where your sight will be regained, he said. And on hearing that, Dora jumped up. Wow, really? Really? Dora asked. But he helped her up and they journeyed with him, holding one of her hands. But where are we going, and can I trust you? We are almost there, and yes, you can trust me, he said confidently. Dora wasn't scared following him to wherever he was taking her so she could see again. All she wanted was to regain her sight. They finally arrived at a place so cool, calm and serene. Wait, is this the river? Dora asked. You're right, Neon said. Dora was about to ask him what they were doing there when she felt splashes of water on her face, and all of a sudden, something pierced through her eyes, and she could see again. "It's a lie, I can see! I can see!" Dora said at the top of her voice, and then she remembered who brought her there. She turned towards his direction to thank him for what he had done, but she didn't see anyone. Dora turned left and then right, front and then back, but she found no one. "Hello? Hello? Neon?" She called several times, but there was no sign of him. She even walked around the river, but there was still no sign of him. She paused for a while, so surprised. How could he suddenly disappear into thin air just like that? The puzzle remained unsolved for her as she finally left for home. When Dora reached home, her stepmother and her children were sitting in front of the house, eating, and one of her children burst into laughter as soon as she saw Dora. "Someone threw away your stick, I guess?" her stepsister quizzed, laughing out so hard. "Come, better find your way to your usual spot or go inside the house. Just leave. Your presence irritates me," her stepmother said, and then took a scoop of whatever they were eating. Dora proceeded into the house, and on seeing how she walked past them majestically, her stepmother dropped the spoon she had in her hand subconsciously, while her children's jaws dropped in awe. Come back," her stepmother said, and Dora took a few steps backward, now standing before them. "Ma?" Dora asked, looking at her. "Can you see me?" her stepmother asked, waving her hand. "I can." "What am I doing?" she probed. "Waving your hand." "Chai, someone has taken this girl to a dibia, native doctor," her stepbrother said, standing up. "How come?" Her stepsister, who was almost the same age as Dora, asked. "A stranger visited a while ago and took me to the river. That was where I regained my sight," Dora explained. "Which river? You mean our village river?" asked her stepmother, and Dora nodded. "You mean you saw the river with water with your very eyes?" she asked again, and Dora again nodded. "But who took you there?" "I don't know him, and his voice wasn't familiar." "Hey, go inside," her stepmother said, looking away. After a few minutes, she called Dora out again. "Go to the river and bring some water," she ordered. "Ma? What is Ma?" "My friend, go and pick a container and bring water from the river." "You think this sight that you regained isn't for a purpose?" "Since my children and I can't see the river, then you will be the one to fetch it." Her children sat there jamming hands with each other and laughing. Dora turned and walked slowly into the house, picked a container, and then left for the river. She felt so bad that she cried on her way there. She sat close to it and began to sing while shedding tears, telling the river what happened in a song. All of a sudden, she heard this sound from the river, as though something came out of it. She paused and stared at it, but saw nothing, though some fishermen used to kill fishes from there sometimes. It could be a big fish, Dora thought to herself, and then continued singing. After about an hour, she bent down to carry her container of water when she sighted the fisherman from afar walking towards her. "It's you," she said, standing up. "Hello, dear friend," he said with a smile. "Good day." "You can see me?" he quizzed. "Yes, I can. I still don't know your name," Dora replied. "My name?" he asked, and she nodded. "My name is Odu." "Yes, Odu," he said with a grin. "You're not sure of your own name?" Dora asked with a smile, but he laughed. "Wow, glad to see that you've regained your sight. How did the miracle happen?" Dora explained about the stranger who had brought her to the river and how she had regained her sight, mentioning that when she opened her eyes, he was nowhere to be found. "Wow, it could be the river god," you know, Odu said with a grin. River god! Don't get me scared, please. Does this river have a god? Dora asked nervously. Just joking. Let me help you, he said, carrying her container of water. As they walked, Odu asked, You regained your sight just yesterday, and they are already stressing you. I really don't have a choice, you know. I must do whatever they want, Dora said with a bowed head. They talked and chatted until they finally arrived a few houses from Dora's home. She collected the container from him and carried it on her head. Odu turned to leave, and they bade each other farewell. He had this charming smile that Dora always wanted to see. Arriving home, Dora dropped the water in the kitchen where her stepmother was already arranging what to cook. Her stepmother started to yell that Dora had stayed out too long, but Dora ignored her. It's my favourite. Let me prepare it just the way I want, her stepmother said, when Dora asked to allow her to prepare the food. Dora went to sit outside when her stepmother refused. To cut the story short, Dora's stepmother was preparing yam porridge, but the yam remained as hard as rock even after 3 hours of cooking it. Even the ingredients she poured into the pot were floating on the water in the pot as the water refused to boil. Her stepmother would come and check the pot countless times, and then make Dora blow the fire repeatedly before going back inside the house. Dora sat outside wondering if it wasn't ordinary porridge yam her stepmother was cooking. How come? Dora would ask herself, as she was so famished. At least, no matter how small her portion would be, it was manageable. Her stepmother returned outside moments later and went into the kitchen to check what she was cooking. This time, she flung the pot cover outside. Dora had even dozed off. It was the sound of the pot cover that jerked her awake. What is this? Ordinary porridge? Her stepmother asked herself, and then came outside from the kitchen angrily. What did you put inside this food that the water has even refused to boil for almost 4 hours now? She demanded. On hearing that, Dora stood up immediately and began to wonder how that could be possible. Nothing, Ma. I didn't put anything, Dora said, waving both hands, but her stepmother gave her a thunderous slap. I've been cooking my food without any issues when you were blind. Now that you've regained your sight, things have begun to get worse. What kind of a child are you? Her stepmother yelled at her, but Dora couldn't do anything. She just stood there crying. Her stepmother returned to the kitchen, brought out the pot, and then emptied the contents on Dora's body. Dora's heart skipped a beat as her jaw dropped in shock, thinking it was boiling water being poured on her, but the water was as cold as ice. All the while when the food was on the fire, Dora didn't have the courage to open the lid to even see the stage it was at, not knowing that the water hadn't even boiled. Her stepmother then slammed the pot on the ground and started to yell at Dora again, accusing her of witchcraft and saying that everything was her fault. What did you do to my food, you daughter of a witch? Her stepmother quizzed again, but Dora shook her head as she stood there drowned in her own tears. Her stepmother let out a long hiss and walked away. Dora cried, and even blamed her late mother for bringing her into this world, only to grow up in the midst of people who didn't like her. A few hours later, it was already late. Dora's stepmother and her children had already gone out to get food for themselves, while Dora sat outside the house lonely, alone, and famished. After singing different songs for hours, Dora decided to go to the river that night, as that was the only place that gave her peace of mind. Dora sat by the river under the very bright moon and sang melodious songs, while also throwing tiny stones into the water. Suddenly, she started to hear footsteps. She turned left and then right, but saw no one, and she became frightened. "Who's there?" she asked, but she could still hear the footsteps. "Who's there?" she asked again, but heard no response. Dora got up to leave immediately and heard laughter coming from behind her. "Don't be scared, it's me," said Odu the hunter. And as soon as Dora saw him, she became a bit relieved. "You scared me," she said with a hand on her chest. "Sorry," he said with a grin. "But what are you doing here at this time of the night?" Dora exhaled and then folded her arms. "My stepmother and step-siblings story," she said, looking away. "What happened this time?" he probed, and Dora explained everything to him. "What are you doing here?" she asked him too. "I'm a hunter, remember? I hunt any time," he replied. He laughed so hard about the porridge that refused to boil, and Dora had to ask him to stop laughing. "Care for some roasted bushmeat?" he asked, and Dora nodded. It was a very big catch this time. "She deserves it, you know," he added. They sat by the river, chatting for a very long time. Dora even sang to him, and finally the meat was ready. She ate to her fill, and after a few minutes she told him she wanted to go. Odu saw her off to the house, but it was late, so the doors had already been locked. Dora was so scared to knock at first, as soon as Odu left, but she summoned the courage to do so. Her stepsister opened the door and started to insult her, calling her a prostitute as soon as she set eyes on her. Dora slapped her, and it resulted in a fight. Before she knew what was happening, her stepmother and her children gathered around her, and she was thoroughly beaten up. "Since you like going to the river, now go and pick up a container from the kitchen and go fetch some water," her stepmother said, and Dora went on her knees. "Please, Ma, it's late. I'll fetch it tomorrow," Dora begged, but her stepmother refused, telling her to fill up the 3 big drums in the kitchen. Well, Dora left for the kitchen to pick up a container, and she left for the river. Everywhere was so quiet because of the time, but all thanks to the moon for its brightness. She sang on her way to the river in tears, walking on the narrow path alone.
Please tell me, are you enjoying the story? If so, tell me, what lessons have you actually learned? I would really love to hear your comments in the comment section down below. And remember to support this channel. Please subscribe, like the video, comment, just say something. Even a word could literally mean a whole lot. So I want you to tell me, what lessons have you learned from this story? Trust me, these are situations that most people actually gone through. I'm sure some of you that are watching this story have actually gone through this situation. So I want to hear from you. I want to hear how you dealt with the situation that you were faced with.
Dora slapped her, and it resulted in a fight. Before she knew what was happening, her stepmother and her children gathered around her, and she was thoroughly beaten up. "Since you like going to the river, now go and pick up a container from the kitchen and go fetch some water," her stepmother said, and Dora went on her knees. "Please, Ma, it's late. I'll fetch it tomorrow," Dora begged, but her stepmother refused, telling her to fill up the 3 big drums in the kitchen. Well, Dora left for the kitchen to pick up a container, and she left for the river. Everywhere was so quiet because of the time, but all thanks to the moon for its brightness. She sang on her way to the river in tears, walking on the narrow path alone. Then, she stopped singing and began to think about her future. Dora soon arrived at the river, but what she saw sent shivers down her spine. She saw the hunter going deep into the water, transforming into this shiny image with long hair. "Odu!" she called with her mouth agape. He looked back all of a sudden with eyes as shiny as the sun, and then stretched forth his arm. On seeing the stretched arm, Dora lost total control of herself and began to walk to him. "Come," he said with a gesture, She walked slowly to him, and he took her hand. They both started sinking deep into the water. Now deep inside the water, they swam for a few minutes and arrived at a place with a very beautiful house. They both stood before the entrance door, and he opened it. They walked in. "Welcome to my house," he said with a smile. But Dora turned and looked at him, and then looked away. His house had a very beautiful interior made of raw gold. He had portraits of a beautiful light-skinned woman and a dark and chubby man on the wall that Dora kept staring at, but she was unable to utter a word. "Sit," he said, pointing at a very beautiful white couch with a gold top. Dora walked slowly to the couch and sat upright on it, staring forward. He looked at her, smiled, and then shook his head. He walked to her and then touched her on the shoulder. Like someone jerking from sleep, she jerked up all of a sudden and started to look around. Who are you?" Dora probed in stutters, staring at a handsome, fair-complexioned man, standing and smiling right in front of her, with very long hair. She had never been so afraid before that she stood there trembling. "I'm your friend," he said with a hand on his chest. "No, you can't be my friend. What am I doing here?" Dora quizzed, looking around. "Wait, isn't this water?" She probed with wide eyes. "Yes, you are in my kingdom," he said. "What? The Marine Kingdom? No, no, get me out of here," Dora said and started to scream. "Wait, I don't bite. It's not what you think and I can explain," he said. But Dora ignored him and continued to scream. She ran toward the entrance door and started forcing the locked door open without the key in the keyhole. "Somebody help!" she screamed. He hurried to her and wanted to touch her, but she dodged him and continued screaming. "Okay, just calm down. My name is Odu, your hunter friend." As soon as Dora heard that, her jaw dropped in awe. "What? No, you can't be Odu," she said in a trembling tone. "Believe me, I am," he said, with a smile, and started to remind her of the encounters they've had together. "Well?" Dora felt a bit relaxed, and they soon started talking like friends. With his gestures and the way he spoke, she was convinced that it was indeed Odu, her friend. They talked for a few hours, and Dora asked him if he was the only one living in the water. He said yes, explaining that he had lost his parents when he was growing up, and had since been living alone. He pointed at the portraits on the wall and said that they were his parents, with a smile. Dora asked him why he had disguised himself as a hunter, and he told her that she wouldn't have accepted to be his friend with his true appearance. He made something for her to eat and ensured that she was very comfortable. When the sun was beginning to set, Dora told him she wanted to return home, but he blatantly refused, saying that she wasn't going to see her stepmother and her children anymore. He suggested that they should start living together in the water, away from the torture. Dora told him she couldn't, and that she didn't belong there, that she needed to go back home, but she promised to come to see him from time to time, and he agreed after much persuasion. "Okay, but not tonight. Please stay till tomorrow," he said. "But my stepmother," Dora began. "Shh, don't worry about her. You will return a totally different person," he said. "But how?" Dora quizzed. "Until then," he replied mysteriously. Dora stayed in the water till the following day and had so much fun swimming around with him. She asked him how come she could swim without drowning, and he said it was because of him. She didn't leave the following day either, wanting to stay a little longer, but the fear of her stepmother lingered in her mind. That night, Odu came to her and started kissing her neck, but Dora immediately knew what he wanted and withdrew herself. "Please," he said. "I'm sorry, I can't," Dora said, already feeling so uncomfortable. "Don't worry, I'm sorry," he said and excused himself. Well, the following day, when Dora decided to leave, he gave her a tiny gold necklace and asked her to always wear it for protection. She nodded. Dora arrived home and saw her stepmother seated before their house with her children. She greeted them, but none bothered to answer. When she was about to go inside the house, her stepmother pulled her back and asked her daughter to bring her a cane. Dora was flogged, but she felt no pain. She was so shocked and surprised, and she stood there watching her stepmother still flogging her with all her strength. All of a sudden, her stepmother staggered back and began to pant, now holding her hand. "Witch, you want to kill me," she said, still panting. "Wait, is it that the strokes of the cane didn't pain you, or what?" "This one you're standing unbothered," her stepbrother asked. "This girl, what have you gone to do this time? Pain relief charm?" her stepsister asked, but Dora turned and looked away. Dora already knew it was Odu's handiwork. After being insulted by all, she left their midst and went inside the house. She could hear her stepmother saying that if she chased Dora out of the house, the villagers would call her wicked. A few hours later, it began to rain heavily, and Dora's stepmother and her children rushed out to put containers in the rain, rejoicing that they wouldn't have to go to the neighboring village to fetch water the following day. But guess what? The rain exempted their house. It rained in the village, but their compound was totally left out. Dora's stepmother and her children stood outside the house crying their eyes out. "What exactly have I done to the gods that's making them punish me this way?" she lamented, still in tears. She opened the living room door and then returned inside, while her children followed from behind, now in her room, wondering if that could be Odu's handiwork too. Dora stood by the window, watching the cloudy sky pour down its content on their neighbors' roofs, and she shook her head. Only the gods know what offense this woman has committed this time. If at all, it's her fault, Dora muttered to herself. When it later stopped raining, Dora's stepmother came into her room with an empty container of water, telling her to go to the river to fetch water. Dora didn't argue. She took the container from her, but noticed her stepmother was staring at her. Dora became uncomfortable and turned to leave, but her stepmother suddenly called her name, still staring at her. "Where did you get that?" she probed, pointing at the necklace Odu had given to Dora. "This?" Dora asked, touching it, and her stepmother nodded with a hand on her waist. A friend gave it to me," Dora said, already frightened. "This is not an ordinary necklace, and I'm sure you must have stolen it from someone." No, Ma, I swear on my late father, I didn't steal it. A friend gave it to me." "No problem, put it in my palm," her stepmother said, stretching forth her hand. "I can't, Ma," Dora said. Her stepmother tried to force her to remove it, but Dora refused. Her stepmother then asked her to get out of her sight, which Dora did immediately by zooming off. "I give you just an hour to fill up those 3 drums in the kitchen," her stepmother said at the top of her voice when Dora was already outside the house. Dora sprinted to the river, without singing this time around, so that Odu wouldn't come out and delay her. She fetched her water, and then hurried back to the house. But to her surprise, as soon as she stepped into the kitchen, she started hearing her stepmother telling her children that the necklace Dora wore wasn't an ordinary one. "I know that necklace. It costs a fortune. Only the gods know where she must have stolen it from," she said. "If I lay my hands on it, I'll just sell it and buy myself a motorcycle," her son was heard saying. "Moron," Who's talking about a motorcycle? That necklace can build 10 modern houses in this village if you don't know, she replied. Wow. So I'm sure we are not going to continue watching her wear it, like it's valueless, said her daughter. What do you want to do? Let's keep watching her first to know where she stole it from before we take action, said the stepmother. Dora tiptoed back outside the house with the water still on her head, waited for a few minutes, and then went back into the kitchen to pour the water into one of the drums. As soon as they heard her, they paused their conversation. She left almost immediately, heading back to the river. As she walked slowly, still in shock, she kept touching the necklace and pondered all they had said. She thought of sitting by the river to sing, but didn't want Neon to know anything yet. After fetching her water, she walked back slowly. Still on her way home, having left the premises of the river, her stepbrother and his friend jumped out from a nearby bush, holding knives. "I need that necklace you're wearing," her brother said in a baritone voice, widening his arms. "What? Neddy, what are you doing here?" she asked, already shivering. "I said, give me the necklace. You're not deaf, are you?" he quizzed. "I'm sorry, I can't," she replied. "You say what?" he questioned, walking up to her and grabbing her arms. Her water container fell and broke. He called on his friend, who rushed forward and tried to remove the necklace forcefully, but she bit his hand. Angered, he brought out his own knife and stabbed her in the stomach, but they were all shocked when the knife refused to penetrate her skin. He stabbed her again with the same result. Her brother withdrew immediately, letting go of her arms. He stood beside his friend and began to stare at her. "Come, this girl is a witch," his friend said, but her brother took to his heels, leaving his friend behind, who also ran away when he saw that he was the only one left. She got up, looked at herself, and touched where she had been stabbed but felt nothing. She cleaned herself up, but was too shocked to either return to the river or go back home. She decided to go back to the river. She sat there crying, without singing for almost an hour when a neighbor showed up to fetch water. The neighbor asked her what was wrong, but she said nothing. The woman took her by the arm, made her get up, and started dusting off her body. "Let's go home," she said. "No, Ma, please let me stay here for a while," Dora pleaded. "No, I insist. Let's go home," the neighbor said, pulling her arm. Dora followed but was scared and couldn't tell the neighbor about her encounter with her younger brother. The neighbor took her home to her stepmother, who was already fuming, yelling that she had come back late. The neighbor begged her not to touch Dora, and then left for her own house. "So, where's the water you went to fetch?" the stepmother asked. As soon as she mentioned it, Dora's stepbrother came out from the living room, giving her an ugly stare. She immediately understood what that look meant and lied, saying it had broken. The stepmother approached in anger and slapped Dora on her cheek, but she grabbed her own cheek instead as soon as she slapped her, while Dora felt no pain. "Again? I understand," the stepmother said, nodding her head. She pushed Dora away and then left the house, walking away in a rush, though Dora didn't know where she was going. The stepmother returned later and made Dora prepare a sumptuous meal for the family. She gave her a large portion, but Dora was surprised at her sudden change and devoured the food without mercy. The next morning, Dora woke up without the necklace on her neck. When she approached her stepmother in the presence of her children, she was beaten up, and the sun strangled her to death. Dora watched as she left her body and stood beside it. Her stepmother and her children quickly left the room after calling Dora's name several times without a response. At first, Dora didn't know she had died. She stood wondering what could be wrong, and how come there was another her lying on the floor. Suddenly her stepmother and her children returned, with her stepmother holding a wrapper. She then covered Dora's body from head to toe with it. "Hey, what are you guys doing?" Dora asked. But no one looked her way or responded. "What's going on?" she asked, her eyes still glued to her other self lying on the floor. Then she looked at herself. "Somebody please wake me up from this slumber," she said, as tears began to gather in both eyes. "Hope it's not what I'm thinking," she asked, now looking at herself again. "She's dead," her stepmother said with a grin. "Wow, beautiful," her stepsister exclaimed with excitement. "What? Who is dead?" Dora probed, now walking to her body which they had already covered. "Remove that wrapper, please. Let me go back into my body," she said, trying to yank off the wrapper, but she couldn't get hold of it. She tried several times, but couldn't grasp it. Dora fell to her knees when it was beginning to seem like reality, and she burst into tears. "The gods, please let this not be true. I want to go back into my body. No, I can't be dead," she said, wailing. Then, her stepmother brought out the necklace Neon had given to Dora, which was tied at the hem of her wrapper. She loosened it and then put it in her palm, smiling broadly. "We are rich!" her son screamed out in excitement, and his sister immediately covered his mouth. "Are you such a fool? Do you want people to notice anything?" his mother asked, now tying back the necklace to the hem of her wrapper. "Let's begin to cry so that the villagers don't suspect anything," she said, and immediately they started wailing at the top of their voices. Villagers started rushing in to see what was happening, and after seeing Dora's lifeless body on the floor, they would start to wail. "What happened to her?" Only Mama Nena, their neighbor, managed to ask, and Dora's stepmother told her that Dora had slept and never woken up. "It's a lie, they killed me," Dora said in tears. But no one could hear her. Villagers started to gather in large numbers, and finally it was decided that Dora would be buried the following day. She wept bitterly, regretting why she didn't even stay back in the river. Now, how would she tell Neon that she had died? Just how? Dora was still there in the room with her body when Neon appeared all of a sudden, his eyes glued to her lifeless form. She thought he couldn't see her, and she stood there with a dropped jaw staring at him. "Neon?" she called, not sure if he could hear her. He turned and then looked at her. "You can see me?" she asked. "Of course I'm not human," he replied. "My stepmother and her children have finally succeeded in killing me," she said in tears. "You're careless," he replied. "How?" she asked. Neon explained, "I gave you signs, Dora. I even made you hear their plans when they were discussing how to get the necklace. But you still stayed back here. Your brother even went as far as attacking you with a knife. But you returned home. Your stepmother hurried out of the house after slapping you, and when she returned, you were made to prepare a sumptuous meal for the family. You not only made it, but you were given a large portion of food to eat, something she had never done, and you didn't suspect anything. You're too careless." "Yes, I am careless, but I thought you said that the necklace was protection, so how come they were able to take it from me?" Dora probed with curiosity. Neon explained that he had allowed it to happen to prove a point about her stepfamily's true nature. He revealed that her stepmother had visited a native doctor and obtained a charm to make Dora unconscious, allowing them to remove the necklace. "Oh, please, make me return to my body. I know you can do it, please," Dora begged on her knees. "Too late," he said. "Why?" she asked. "Because you're carrying my child," he said, and as soon as Dora heard that, she stood up. She was so shocked that she stood there with wide eyes for a few seconds. "No, that's a lie. We didn't do anything," she protested. "We did. To you, we did nothing, but we actually did something in the room," he said with a smile. "What? Did you invite me to your world to use me, Neon?" she asked, shocked. "No, because I love you. You will be my wife and also live with me now that they have taken your life," he said. Dora looked at her stomach and then at him. "I'm sorry," he whispered with a nod. People were gathered at this point, wailing. Neon grabbed Dora's hand and then whispered in her ear, "Let's go." They left the room and then the compound, but Dora kept looking back, not sure of the lifetime decision she was about to make. But she didn't have a choice, did she? "The burial is tomorrow," a woman said to another woman beside her as they walked out. And Dora started to cry again on hearing that. Dora turned and looked at Neon. He looked back and then looked away. "Please, I need to go back," she said, crying. "It's too late, Dora," he replied as they proceeded slowly to the river. She didn't want to follow him, but where else could she go? Dora continued crying and refused to respond to whatever Neon was telling her. They arrived at the river and swam deep into it. She cried until they finally reached his place, and she sat in a corner of the living room without talking to him. He brought something for her to eat, but she refused to take it. He apologized and tried convincing her to go into his room, but she refused, and she stayed there alone until night fell. After a while, he came to her and squatted beside her. "You really want to return home?" he probed, but she turned and looked at him, then looked away. "All right, fine if you want to go back," he said, and she grinned immediately. "Are you serious?" she asked, elated. "Yes, if that's the only thing I can do to make you happy," he replied with his head bowed. Dora stood up and ran toward the entrance door. "Where are you going?" Neon asked, standing there and staring at her. "Home," she said, already opening the entrance door. "Come on, what's the hurry when you are still going to return home?" "After I'm buried?" she asked. "No, you will leave very early tomorrow morning, not today. It's late already," he said with his hands held behind him. "Please, I must return home now," she pleaded, already in tears. "Stop being so stubborn. I know why I'm telling you that you will return tomorrow. Or do you want to be killed the second time?" "Oh, okay," she said, shocked to hear what he said. "I wish you could stay," he said, with a bowed head again. Dora reached out to him and raised his head with a finger under his jaw. "Thank you so much. I will never forget this day," she said, and he nodded. "But am I really pregnant?" she asked, and he nodded again. "But how?" she questioned with a hand on her stomach. "I'm sorry, but I made you fall asleep, and then I had my way," he said, scratching his head. "It's just a few days ago, so how come I'm pregnant?" "Because it's a child of the river god, not of human. You took in that very day, and I made it so on purpose." "But I trusted you," she said with tears flowing freely down her cheeks. "I'm so sorry, but I did it for you," he said. "I don't understand," Dora replied. "You soon will," he answered. "But how possible will it be to carry a—" she asked with mouth agape, but he immediately cut in. "A river god's child?" he questioned, and her mouth shut immediately. Neon explained that she wouldn't understand why he was doing this now, but he wanted to fight this fight for her through someone people would reverence and respect. He promised never to make her regret carrying this pregnancy or having anything to do with him. Dora expressed her confusion, and Neon assured her she would understand soon. After going inside his room with him, she sat on one of the chairs and started to ponder on all Neon had said to her. She wondered if keeping this pregnancy would add to her suffering and couldn't sleep all through the night. The following day, very early in the morning, Dora told Neon that she was ready to go back, but he refused, saying that it was too early. She wanted to argue with him, but decided to follow his decision, though she was restless. A few hours later, he finally asked them to leave. They swam out of the water and headed to her house. People were already gathered, and Dora's corpse was beside the grave they had dug next to the house. "Did you see that?" she asked, almost rushing there, but Neon grabbed her hand. "Patience," he said, and she paused. They overheard Dora's stepmother giving a false eulogy, praising Dora as a dutiful daughter. Dora was shocked by the lies, and Neon explained that he wanted her to hear that part. Neon then told Dora she could return. She thanked him with a hug and ran into the crowd, then to her body. The coffin was open, so she laid down in it, and after a few seconds she jerked back to life. As soon as the people there witnessed this unimaginable event, they took to their heels, screaming at the top of their voices. Dora climbed down from the coffin and looked toward where Neon had been standing, but he was no longer there. She felt bad about his disappearance. Dora entered the house without a word to anyone. That day, people kept coming in large numbers to see the girl that returned from the land of the dead. Even the king sent for her, and a small party was thrown for her in the palace. Since Dora had come back to life, her stepmother and her children had abandoned the house and hadn't returned when she came back from the palace. She was home alone that night, with no sign of them until the following day. The next day, Dora decided to go to the river to sing, hoping to see Neon. But she sang for hours, and he didn't show up. She was so hurt that she cried and cried. As she decided to return home, she started to hear people's voices wailing and screaming from afar. Approaching her house, she noticed the commotion was coming from there. Dora ran home as fast as she could and saw people gathered around her stepmother and stepsister, who were seated on the ground wailing loudly. As she approached, the crowd parted to let her pass, and attention shifted to her. The wailing subsided to a murmur. People began whispering to each other, while others watched Dora with keen interest. She walked straight to her stepmother and stepsister and squatted before them. She could see shock and fright in their eyes. They couldn't even look at her. "What's going on?" Dora asked them. They turned and looked at each other, then at her. Her stepmother finally spoke. "We lost my son last night. Thank you for your evil act." "Oh, please, stop pretending as if you don't know anything about it," her stepsister interjected. "I know everything, okay? If not, how would lightning just strike down a young man like that? No rain, nothing. If it wasn't from you, then from who? Knowing fully well that it's an abomination for lightning to strike someone from this village. He's been buried in the evil forest. So are you happy now?" "Mama, how can you say that? How can I possibly send lightning after my own brother?" Dora said, tears welling up in her eyes. "You want to start pretending, right? Who in this village does not know that you exchanged your life with that of my son?" Her stepmother accused. "What?" Dora exclaimed. "But it was you and your children who—" she began, but her stepmother cut her off, screaming at the top of her voice for people to help her and come to her rescue. Dora stood up slowly, tears in her eyes, and looked around to see how the people present would react, but they just stood staring at her. Her stepmother got up and started retying her wrapper in a rush, then screamed at her daughter, who still sat there with head bowed, asking her to get up before she would pounce on her. The girl got up slowly. "Please, help me carry her to the palace. She must explain to me, the king, and the villagers how my son got struck by lightning," her stepmother demanded, but nobody moved. "Dora, follow me to the palace if you know you're innocent," she said, already on her way. "Mama, I'm innocent," Dora managed to say, and her stepmother looked back immediately. "If you know you're innocent, follow me to the palace." Dora started following her, while the people around followed from behind. They arrived at the palace with the king, the queen, and some of the cabinet members already seated, as if they were in a meeting before the group came in. One of the cabinet members asked what the matter was, and Dora's stepmother immediately started telling them that Dora had killed her son. "How?" the king asked, and she told them that Dora had exchanged her life with that of her son. "How possible is it?" the king asked again, smiling. "Your Highness, you don't know what this girl is capable of doing. Her heart is so wicked and deep. She killed my son, and I'm very sure of that. If you think I'm lying, you can send for the village Dibia so she can swear to prove her innocence," her stepmother insisted. "I don't believe what you're saying. Isn't this the same girl who returned from the land of the dead?" the king questioned, looking at the queen, who already sat there looking confused. "Exactly!" the queen exclaimed suddenly. "Your Highness, I'm innocent," Dora said, kneeling. "I wasn't going to let this out, but at this point I have to. It was my stepmother and her children that killed me that day I died. Her son, in particular, strangled me to death." Everyone there gasped in shock. "You're a liar!" her stepmother retorted. "This same girl is possessed and doesn't even know what she's saying. If you think I'm lying, let me show you something." She untied the knot she had made with the hem of her wrapper. "See this? This is the necklace of the water spirits," she added, raising the necklace Neon had given to Dora. Dora was shocked to see it. "Okay, so how does it relate to the issue at hand?" a cabinet member probed. "Thank you. I caught her in the middle of the night some few days ago, calling my son's name and asking their god to take him in her place. I heard it from my room and I tiptoed to hers, only to find her holding this necklace and talking to it," the stepmother explained. "Mama!" Dora screamed with wide eyes. Her stepmother turned and looked at her. "Am I lying?" she asked her daughter, who stood there beside her timidly. Her daughter couldn't even look at her and wasn't as lively as she used to be. "No, you are not," she finally managed to say, drawing a circle on the ground with her big toe. "Are you sure about this?" the king asked, and Dora's stepmother affirmed. "She's lying," Dora said, sobbing. "Then you will need to swear to prove your innocence," another cabinet member said. The village native doctor was sent for immediately, and he arrived after about half an hour, chanting at the top of his voice from afar. He entered the palace, and they all greeted him, but as soon as he saw Dora, he came close. "Please, make her swear." "She's denying killing my son," said Dora's stepmother. "First of all, great native doctor, do you know anything about this necklace?" the king asked, and Dora's stepmother raised it. The native doctor looked at it for a few seconds, then breathed out. "Yes, it's from the water. If you're not one of them or related to them, you can't use it," he said. "Your Highness, I can explain," Dora said loudly. Before you explain, Great Native Doctor, make her swear an oath that she knows nothing about the death of this woman's son, the Queen interjected. The Native Doctor looked into Dora's eyes, then turned swiftly. She can't swear now until after 9 months, for she's with a child in her womb, he revealed, and Dora's stepmother's jaw dropped in awe. He continued, within these 9 months until she gives birth, woman, you must make sure that you don't put her through any form of stress, else another calamity will befall you. She's your stepdaughter, but look after her like your own within these months. I shall be back after 9 months for the swearing. With that, he turned and danced out of the palace.
If you made it to the end of part 2 of this thrilling story, then all I can say is congratulations and thank you. These videos really take a lot of time to make, but you guys' support really keep me going. Comments below and share this video with your friends and family. Also, like and subscribe to the channel so that you'll be the first to be notified when I drop a new video.
Dora's stepmother stood there, watching the chief priest, also known as Dibia, dance out of the palace, too shocked to utter a word. It was when the Queen cleared her throat that she snapped out of whatever thought she was lost in. Woman, you have heard with both ears what the chief priest just said, the king declared. Make sure she doesn't go through any form of stress as he instructed. I will send for you after 9 months for the swearing. You may all leave now. They all left the palace. On their way home, Dora's stepmother and her daughter walked side by side in front of her, while she walked slowly behind them. There was nothing Dora's ears didn't hear from her stepmother. She kept hurling insults at Dora, while her daughter remained silent, walking beside her mother as if she no longer knew how to talk. Dora ignored every insult, but her joy was in the fact that her stepmother was told not to stress her throughout the period of her pregnancy. They arrived home, and her stepmother sat on the veranda outside the house, calling Dora names and accusing her of things she didn't do. Dora went into her room quietly and sat on the floor, reflecting on all Neon had said to her. She started to feel bad that he didn't even come out to see her when she visited the river after singing different songs. She got up and went to take a shower. After returning from the bathroom, she noticed an old plastic bucket in the corner of her room, where she kept her folded clean clothes. As she took out clothes to wear, a wrapped black nylon fell on the floor. At first, she wanted to ignore it, thinking it was just a nylon, but she felt compelled to check if there was something inside. Dora picked up the nylon and noticed it was properly wrapped. She carefully opened it and, to her surprise, found money inside. She paused, looking left and right, dropping the cloth in her hand on the floor. How did this get here? She wondered aloud. She counted the money and found it was 21,000 naira notes. Is this a setup or something? She muttered, hand on her waist and gaze fixed. Well, they have failed again, she said, picking up her cloth from the floor and putting it on. Dora went straight to her stepmother, who was still sitting on the veranda spewing insults and curses, and stretched forth the money to her. Her stepmother looked at her scornfully from head to toe. What is that? She asked, looking away, followed by a long hiss. It's money, Ma. I don't know who kept it in my room, so I brought it to you, Dora explained. Please, I beg you, with whatever you hold dear, take that evil spirit money and get out of my sight. Are you devising another means to get me penalized? You want me to take it so that by tomorrow morning, I won't wake up from sleep? Mama, it's not like that. I don't know who kept it in my room. I thought it was one of you. That's why I brought it, Dora insisted. Please, just leave here with that money. It's not ours, her stepmother said dismissively. Dora returned to her room, wondering who had dropped the money there after locking her door from behind. A few minutes later, she dozed off after pondering who could have left it, and she had a dream. In the dream, she saw Neon standing by her door, telling her to take care of herself and the baby, explaining that he was the one who had left the money when he visited earlier. It was the bang on her door by her stepmother that jerked Dora awake. "Where's that prostitute?" her stepmother called at the top of her voice as Dora rushed to open the door. Her stepmother flung the door open as soon as Dora unlocked it and marched in with both hands on her waist. "Who got you pregnant?" she demanded, and Dora immediately began to scratch her head nervously. "Talk to me. Who got you pregnant?" she probed again in a harsh tone, causing Dora to shiver. When Dora didn't answer, her stepmother stared at her for a few seconds before a devilish smile spread across her face. "Follow me," she commanded, and Dora obeyed. They arrived in the living room, where her stepmother handed her a concoction in a small glass cup. "Drink it. It's not under my watch that you will carry this bastard in your womb. The swearing must take place, so you will drink it," her stepmother insisted. "I can't," Dora said, already in tears. Unbeknownst to Dora, her stepmother had teamed up with her daughter. They pushed Dora to the floor and were about to forcefully pour the concoction down her throat when a very little girl appeared out of nowhere, wearing a pure white wrapper from her neck down. She stretched forth her arm, and the glass cup of concoction disappeared into her palm. Dora's stepmother and her daughter suddenly let go of her, and they started looking around in confusion. What just happened? Where's the cup? Her stepmother probed, searching frantically. Her daughter had already reached the entrance door, visibly shaking. "What just happened?" Dora's stepmother asked again, now staring at her, looking frightened. I don't know," Dora stuttered, also looking around in bewilderment. "This girl is possessed. Dora, you're possessed," her stepmother shouted at the top of her voice. Dora tried to say something in her defense, but the more she opened her mouth, the more she stuttered. "I can't stay here," her stepsister said, flinging the entrance door open and dashing out of the house without looking back. Her mother followed suit, leaving Dora all alone in the living room. Dora stood there, wondering what had just happened and why a little girl in a white wrapper had appeared in their living room to save her. She tried to connect it to Neon, but it didn't make sense. She decided to go to the river to see if Neon would come out to meet her this time. As Dora opened the entrance door, she saw her stepmother and stepsister seated on the veranda outside the house. But as soon as they saw her, they stood up abruptly and almost ran out of the compound. Dora pretended not to notice how frightened they were and walked out. She hurried to the river, sat by it, and began to sing about all she'd been through since the last time she saw Neon. She sang and sang, but he refused to appear. Dora felt not only disappointed, but heartbroken. After sitting there for almost 2 hours, Dora decided to leave as it was about to rain. She stood up and walked slowly through the narrow river path. Suddenly, she heard footsteps behind her. Dora turned multiple times to see what it was, but found nothing. She continued walking. "Mother!" a voice called out abruptly. Dora looked back swiftly, and to her shock, saw the little girl who had saved her life earlier. She screamed and almost took to her heels. "Wait!" the little girl shouted, stretching forth her hand. "Mother!" she called again. Upon hearing that, Dora turned and looked around to see if the girl meant someone else, but it was just the two of them. Dora was so scared that her whole body started shaking. Who, you? Did you, miss your way? I don't think that your mother is anywhere around here, she stammered. You are my mother, Dora, the little girl said, still smiling. What? But how? Dora asked, bewildered. Only when the time is right, the girl replied cryptically. I don't understand, Dora said, her eyes still glued to the child, waiting for an explanation. Like I said, only when the time is right, the girl repeated. You will not have to suffer anymore. I am here now. Please don't confuse me further. Who really are you? Dora pleaded. The little girl smiled again, and then disappeared before Dora's very eyes. Dora screamed and ran home as fast as her legs could carry her. That day, it rained heavily, but not even a drop fell on their house, just like it had happened the other day. The following morning, which happened to be a market day, Dora woke up famished. She remembered that she hadn't eaten anything the previous day. Still having the money she had found in the bucket, she decided to go to the market to get a few things. Upon arriving at the market, Dora noticed something unusual. Everyone seemed eager to interact with her. At all the shops where she tried to make purchases, the vendors refused to take her money. She had never been so shocked in her life. Carrying the items she had been given in a polythene bag, Dora started her journey back home, wondering about the strange turn of events. As she walked through a bush path, a man approached and offered to help her carry her load. Initially, she refused, but when he persisted, she reluctantly agreed. The man walked ahead of her, and suddenly, Dora noticed a necklace around his neck, exactly like the one Neon had given her. Stop, Dora exclaimed. She moved closer to him after he paused and stared closely at the necklace. Please don't be offended. Where did you get this necklace on your neck? She asked, pointing at it. Oh, this? He asked, touching the necklace. Yes, Dora replied, nodding eagerly. A woman sold it to my mother, he explained. Sold this? Dora questioned, her mouth agape. Yes. Is there a problem? He asked, looking concerned. No, nothing, Dora said, forcing a smile. Do you know how much it was bought for? Well, it's not too expensive. She mentioned 1 million naira, but my mother gave her 30,000 naira, and she happily accepted it. What? Please, who is your mother? Dora asked, trying to hide her shock. I'm not from this village, I'm from the neighboring village, he said with a smile, then looked into her eyes. What's the matter? Is there something you're not telling me? Nothing, Dora replied quickly, waving her hands. You know what? Let's just go. No, wait, he said, and Dora paused. If you like it, I can give it to you. No, please, I actually don't. I don't want it. It just looks like one I used to have, but I no longer have it. Dora stammered. No, it's okay. You can have it, he insisted, already stretching it out to her. You mean it? Dora asked, surprised. Yes, you can. Dora reached for it and took it from him, her eyes tearing up. Thank you. But what about your mum? What if she asks you where it is? Don't worry about my mum, he said with a smile. Shall we continue? Oh, yes, please. Sorry for the delay. Dora apologized. As they walked, Dora kept staring at the necklace, wondering if it was actually her stepmother who had sold it or someone else. When they reached Dora's home, she quickly took the bag from him and thanked him profusely for helping her carry her load. He bid her farewell, but she invited him to sit so she could offer him something. He declined, saying he would visit some other time. As soon as he turned to leave, Dora's stepmother came out of the house and was visibly shocked to see him. "Dale, what are you doing in my house?" she asked, eyeing him from head to toe. "Ah, Mama, good day, Ma," he greeted, bending his knees respectfully. "Good day. Or are you here to see my daughter?" she asked, smiling. "Actually, Ma, I was on my way home when I saw your daughter carrying this bag from the market, so I decided to help her with it," he replied with a smile. "No, I don't mean her. She's my stepdaughter. I mean my biological daughter. She's inside the house. Should I call her out for you?" "Oh, never mind, Ma. That would be for some other time. I must leave now," he said, and waved at Dora. As Dora turned to go into the kitchen, she heard his voice again. "Sorry, I didn't ask you your name," he called out. "Dora. My name is Dora," she replied. "Okay, Dora. See you some other time," he said, and Dora responded with a smile. Dora's stepmother couldn't even wait for Dale to leave. As soon as he stepped out, she cleared her throat and turned to Dora. "Excuse me, how and where did you meet him?" she probed, one hand on her waist. "But he just told you how we met," Dora replied, confused. "Are you insane? Are you referring to me? Is that how you talk to me now?" her stepmother snapped. "Mama, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to disrespect you. But he just explained exactly how we met," Dora said, trying to remain calm. "You must be a fool. Who knows if he's not the one responsible for your pregnancy?" "Possessed being," her stepmother spat, staring scornfully at Dora. "Mama, please, he's not," Dora pleaded, turning to leave. "I don't want to see you in my kitchen, and don't touch either my pot or my utensils with those miserable hands of yours," her stepmother warned. "Mama, please don't do this. I'm famished," Dora begged. "That's your business. Carry those things you bought out of my kitchen." "But this is my father's kitchen, and most of these things here belong to my late mother, if I remember correctly," Dora argued. "I give you 2 minutes to get out of my sight. I know you're possessed, and there's no way one can discipline you any longer. But I'm begging you, get out of my kitchen." "You can die of hunger for all I care," her stepmother said harshly before leaving for the living room. Confused and hurt, Dora began to shed tears. She picked up the polythene bag and decided to go to her room through the back door instead of the front door. Suddenly, she saw a well-made fire by her window with 3 brand new pots beside it. Dora paused, wondering why her stepmother would make a fire by her window. And then, the little girl appeared once again. "There you go. That's fire, and those are pots. So, prepare whatever you want to eat," she said with a smile. Stunned, Dora opened her mouth to say something but giggled instead. Everything seemed like a dream, so unbelievable. "Who really are you?" Dora asked again. "Like I said the other time, your daughter," the girl replied, still smiling. "I still don't understand what you're trying to say. Who really are you?" Dora persisted. "In a few months' time," the girl repeated, and then disappeared. As soon as the girl vanished, Dora took a few steps backward and stared at the fire, contemplating whether to place a pot on it or not. She tiptoed to the back of the house and peeped around, making sure nobody was there. She returned to the veranda and sat down, still wondering what was really happening. After a few minutes, she got up, picked one of the pots, and placed it on the fire. She prepared her food right there without anyone noticing. After she was done, Dora went into her room. She ate and then fell asleep right there on the spot, only to be awakened in the early hours of the next day by loud bangs on the entrance door. "Who is that?" her stepmother called out, but the person did not respond. Her stepmother screamed Dora's name from her room, asking her to go find out who it was. Still feeling dizzy, Dora managed to make her way to the front door. As soon as she opened it, a middle-aged woman grabbed her blouse and dragged her out of the living room. "Leave me alone! Leave me alone!" Dora screamed, struggling to remove the woman's grip from her blouse. "If I slap you, you will vanish into thin air," the woman threatened. "Madam, leave me alone now. Who are you?" Dora asked loudly. At that moment, Dora's stepmother and stepsister dashed out of the house. "Ah, Mama Dale, what's going on? What are you doing here this early?" Dora's stepmother asked, looking surprised. "I am here because of this daughter of yours that returned from the land of the dead," the woman said, still gripping Dora's blouse. "God forbid, she's not my daughter. This is my daughter beside me." Dora's stepmother quickly interjected, pointing to her biological daughter. "That's not why I'm here. You sold me a necklace and then sent this same girl here to come collect it back somehow," Mama Dale accused. Hearing that, Dora's stepmother's jaw dropped in shock. Dora realized that this was Dale's mother, the one who had bought the necklace. "I don't understand. Please make me understand," Dora's stepmother said, feigning ignorance. "Why don't you ask this prostitute you call a daughter or a maid? I don't care whatever she is to you." Dale took the necklace from my box, and after torturing him when I couldn't find it, he confessed to me that he gave it to her, Mama Dale explained angrily. "It's a lie," Dora's stepmother exclaimed, her mouth agape. She turned to Dora. "Is that true? Now where's the necklace?" "But the necklace is mine. It was never yours," Dora yelled defiantly. "If you don't provide that necklace this minute, I will hit you hard where it will hurt you so bad." "You know me?" her stepmother threatened. "I'm not giving it back," Dora insisted. "I give you just 2 minutes to provide that necklace, or I will burn down this house. I mean it. I don't want a refund. All I want is the necklace," Mama Dale warned. "Don't be offended, please," Dora's stepmother pleaded with Mama Dale, before turning back to Dora. "Dora, did you hear what she just said? Give her the necklace, now." "I did, but I'm never giving it back no matter what you do to me," Dora replied firmly. "So you're not just possessed, but also a thief," her stepsister chimed in. "Don't you dare call me that, you ill-mannered fool." Dora lashed out. Suddenly, Dora's stepmother and stepsister whispered to each other before dashing into the house. They returned with Dora's bucket of clothes, turned it upside down, emptying its contents on the ground. The necklace Dora had kept in the bucket the previous night fell out. Her stepsister picked it up, grinning, and handed it to her stepmother. "Give me that. It is not yours," Dora yelled, almost running to them, but Mama Dale dragged her back, still gripping her blouse. "Mama Dale, please don't be offended. Here it is," Dora's stepmother said, walking towards them and about to hand over the necklace when something mysterious happened. The necklace turned into a rope right before their eyes. Dora's stepmother flung it aside, and they all screamed in unison. Mama Dale released Dora's blouse and sprinted out of the house, screaming at the top of her voice as if she had seen a ghost. Dora quickly picked up the rope, and as soon as she did, it turned back into the necklace. Without hesitation, she ran as fast as her legs could carry her, headed straight for the river. On reaching the riverbank, Dora saw Neon standing in the water. "Neon!" she called out at the top of her voice. He initially stood with his back to her, but as soon as he heard her voice, he turned to face her. "Neon!" she called again, almost screaming out her lungs. She began to run towards him but couldn't enter the water, so she started to swim instead. Neon paused for a while, staring at her without a word. As Dora almost reached him, he disappeared. "Neon! Neon! Neon!" she called out, bursting into tears, but he didn't reappear. Dora remained in the water, swimming back and forth for almost an hour, confused about what to do next, weeping bitterly. Little did she know that this encounter would lead to more revelations and set the stage for the next chapter in her extraordinary journey. As Dora swam back and forth, weeping, a young woman she had never seen before came to fetch water at the river. Noticing Dora's distress and her reluctance to leave the water, the woman stood watching her with concern. "Hello, are you okay?" the woman called out, but Dora ignored her. "Come on, you can talk to me," she persisted, but Dora couldn't bring herself to confide in a stranger. "See, if you remain in the water for so long, you're going to catch a cold," the woman warned, but Dora paid no heed. After a few minutes of waiting for Dora to come out, the woman dove into the river and swam to her. "Whatever it is that you're going through, you don't have to drown yourself," she said, gently dragging Dora out. Once on dry land, Dora lay down and continued to cry, her sobs racking her body. The woman sat beside her, offering silent comfort. "Look, whatever it is, be rest assured that all will be well," she said softly. Dora sat up, managing a weak smile despite the pain evident on her face. "Thank you," she whispered. The woman squatted beside her, looking into her eyes. "Is it something you would want to share?" she asked, but Dora shook her head. "Okay then, if you say so," the woman said, smiling back. "Anyway, my name is Neni." "I'm Dora," Dora replied. "Are you from this village?" Neni questioned. "Yes, and you?" Dora asked in return. "Yes, I am," Neni replied, and immediately Dora looked at her more closely, realizing her face didn't look familiar. "Are you sure? I don't think I have seen this face before," Dora said, her eyes still fixed on Neni. "Yes, you may not have, but my grandmother and I live on the outskirts of the village," Neni explained. "Oh, okay. No wonder I have never come across you before," Dora said, and Neni smiled. "I must go now before my grandmother starts looking for me," Neni said, lifting her pot of water onto her head. "I don't intend to stay here any longer. We can leave here together if you don't mind," Dora suggested, standing up. Her clothes were dripping, but she didn't care. "Oh, okay. That would be great," Neni agreed. As they walked together, chatting and smiling, Neni asked, "So, who is your mother here?" Dora looked at her and exhaled. "My mother and father are late, but I live with my stepmother and her children." "Oh, I'm so sorry about that," Neni said sympathetically. "It's nothing," Dora replied, trying to sound nonchalant. The necklace had been in Dora's pocket since she ran from the house to the river. She took it out and was about to put it on when Neni noticed it and gasped in shock. "Who gave you that?" Neni asked, her eyes wide. "This?" Dora asked, holding up the necklace. Neni nodded. "A friend gave it to me," Dora said, slipping it around her neck. "What? Is that your friend from the river?" Neni inquired, her voice filled with curiosity and a hint of concern. Dora paused, surprised by Neni's question. "How do you know that?" Neni's expression changed, becoming more serious. "Well, my grandmother is from the river, and she has something like this." Dora's heart began to race. Could this be the connection she had been seeking? As they continued their walk, Dora realized that her encounter with Neni might be the key to unraveling the mysteries surrounding her life. The necklace, and her connection to the river.
This story is about to get even more interesting. Therefore, I really need to know that you are enjoying the story. So say something in the comment section, or you can comment whatever it is that you like. I really want to see that you guys are enjoying the story for me to be motivated to post the next story. So please, first of all, subscribe. Secondly, please make sure to like the video. And thirdly, please write a comment, write anything. So first of all, tell me how interesting the story is and what you've actually learned.
"Leave her alone," exclaimed the little girl. "You know what, I think I'll have to put an end to your existence," said the old woman. She looked into the sky, and immediately lightning struck with a heavy sound of thunder. She looked down at the little girl, and all of a sudden, Dora saw lightning descending live, almost striking the little girl on her chest. But to her surprise, the little girl grabbed it before her very eyes and flung it aside. "Your grandmother," Dora exclaimed. "Yes. Is anything the matter?" Nenny asked. "No, I mean, yes. Please, can you take me to your grandmother?" Nenny turned and looked at Dora. Though she was skeptical at first, she later agreed. They left for her place, but her grandmother was not around. Nenny searched for her around the house but couldn't find her. Dora had to sit somewhere before the house because she wasn't ready to leave without seeing her. Dora was there with Nenny for almost an hour, and when she finally made up her mind to leave, she heard a woman's voice calling Nenny from the back of the house. Dora raised her head immediately, looking at Nenny, waiting for her to tell her that which she wanted to hear. "That's my grandmother," Nenny said, and Dora jumped up immediately, elated. Nenny stood up and was going to the back of the house, and Dora followed from behind, but Nenny turned, facing her again. Dora, you know what? Just go back and sit down. Let me tell my grandmother about you first. Then I'll come and call you once she asks me to," Nenny said. "Oh, okay. That's a good idea," Dora replied, turning back. Dora sat before the house for about another 30 minutes, but Nenny didn't come for her. She sat there wondering what could be wrong, or maybe the woman didn't even want to see her. She stood up to go home because the day was already far spent, and apart from that, she was already famished. "Nenny! Nenny!" Dora called, but heard no response. She turned to leave, but thought it wouldn't be right to just leave like that without informing anyone. So she decided to go to the back of the house to inform them that she was leaving. "Nenny!" she called again, but still no response. As Dora approached the back of the house, something was whispering to her to just go home, but another voice in her head was telling her to go ahead. She obeyed the one telling her to go ahead. Reaching the back of the house, Dora saw something she didn't recover from for almost 3 days. She saw Nenny and the old woman both tying white wrappers from their chest down, coming out from a river behind their house. Dora stood there shocked, watching them emerge from the water with their heads, and then walking out of it. She wanted to scream, but covered her mouth immediately, tiptoed back, and then took to her heels, running straight home. Dora threw the living room door open and ran straight into her room. She could hear her stepmother asking her daughter if she saw who was chasing Dora, but the daughter said she saw nothing. Dora sat on the floor, visibly shaking, trying to comprehend what she had just witnessed. Wait, what did I just witness? And how come there's a river behind their house, but Nenny still came to fetch water from the village river? Dora sat there, asking herself until she finally fell asleep. Very early the following day when Dora woke up, she thought about the event that took place the previous day, wondering who Nenny truly was. But her stomach was so empty because she hadn't eaten anything the previous day. She got up, took some money from her bucket to go get something to eat, but as soon as she turned, There the little girl was, standing with a smile on her face, stretching forth a plate of Dora's favourite dish. Dora froze on seeing her, and her jaw dropped in awe as soon as she sighted the plate the girl was carrying. "Come on, go ahead and take it," the little girl said with a smile. "But I don't understand," Dora said, looking around. "Just take it. Enjoy your meal." "I'm sorry, I can't take it. Who exactly are you and where did you get this food? Even though it's my favorite, I just can't take it." The little girl giggled, looking away, and then looked at Dora again. "First of all, don't be surprised whenever I call you Mom. You are my mother," she said. "Please stop saying that. You're speaking in parables, and I don't understand it," Dora replied. "I'm sorry, but it's the truth," the girl insisted. "Make me understand all this, please. Don't leave me in the dark," Dora pleaded. "First of all, take the food from me," the girl said, and Dora looked into her eyes for confirmation. "Take it," the girl repeated. Dora reached for it and took the plate of food from her. "But where did you get this, please?" Dora asked. "Daddy asked me to bring it to you," the girl said, smiling. "Daddy? Who is your daddy?" The girl then giggled with a hand over her mouth. "Neon is my daddy," she revealed, and as soon as she mentioned it, Dora's door opened all of a sudden. It was her stepmother. As soon as her stepmother stepped in, Dora hid the food behind her. "Who have you been talking to?" her stepmother asked, looking around. To Dora's surprise, she didn't see the little girl. "No, nobody. I was just talking to myself," Dora stuttered. Her stepmother turned, looking around again, and then clapped her hands 3 times. "I don't think I can continue staying in this house with someone like you. I don't even understand the kind of human that you've become. Ever since you returned from the land of the dead, you have been acting like a ghost, and also an evil spirit. Isn't that too much for one person?" "Mama, please! I'm not in the mood for this right now. No offense, but I'd appreciate it if you left my room, please." "What is that thing you're hiding behind you?" her stepmother asked, stretching her neck to look at it. "Nothing, Mama," Dora said, blocking her view. "That's your business. I'll have to report you to the king because living here with you gets me scared by the day. I just can't do this anymore," her stepmother said, stepping out. Dora bolted her door immediately from the inside as soon as her stepmother left, and she turned now facing the little girl. "How did you do it?" Dora quizzed with mouth agape. "Do what?" the girl asked, smiling broadly. "I mean my stepmother. She didn't see you. How on earth did you do it?" "Well, I'm not of this world, so I can decide whether to be seen or not," the girl explained. Dora sat on the bare floor, with her knees raised up, and her hands holding her legs, wondering why Neon no longer wanted to see her after she had conceived for him. She wept bitterly. She fell asleep and had a dream, or rather, a nightmare. In it, she saw Nenny and Neon standing in their village river with rings on their married fingers. Dora wailed upon seeing them, and when she woke up, she was still wailing. She got up in the middle of the night, gently opened the door, and sprinted to the river in the dead of night, just to confirm if what she had dreamt about was truly happening, as her dreams often came to pass. To her horror, upon reaching the river, she saw Nani and Neon holding hands, dancing to the sound of drums being played by people in white attire. She was about to scream when the little girl appeared suddenly and covered her mouth. "Shh," the little girl whispered, and Dora immediately remained calm. With the girl's hand still over her mouth, Dora watched in disappointment as Neon danced with Nenny, holding hands and embracing each other like newly wedded couples. When she couldn't bear it any longer, Dora signaled the little girl to allow her to return home. The girl removed her hand and quietly pulled Dora up, displaying surprising strength. She held one of Dora's hands and made her walk quietly out of there. But somehow in the process of walking out, Dora was caught by one of the people beating the drums. They immediately stopped drumming. "Hey, who is that?" Dora heard suddenly from behind. She looked back swiftly to be sure it was her being referred to, but immediately she found herself in her room. She stood in the middle of her room looking around, wondering how she had managed to get there when the voice of the little girl startled her. "My mistake. I didn't know they were going to see you. I would have made you invisible as soon as I got there," the little girl said. Dora stood there disappointed as hot tears flowed down her face. "I am so heartbroken," she whispered with her head bowed. "You don't need to be," the little girl consoled her. "You should understand by now that you and Neon belong to two separate worlds and are not compatible. I know you love him, but do you think it will be possible for you two to live together? In whose world? In yours? Or his? How long do you think you can survive in the water if you two start to live there? Or do you think Neon will abandon his world and everything and come stay here with you? I don't want you to feel bad. Just know that ever meeting Neon happened for a reason." As soon as Dora heard that, she looked up. "Meeting Neon happened for a reason? What reason, if I may ask? What reason in particular made him put me in a family way, and now he doesn't even want to see me anymore?" "I'm not trying to take sides, but all he did for you. I know he once truly loved you. Maybe he still does, I don't know. But having a child will pave the way for so many positive things for you. You will no longer be bullied, maltreated, or disrespected. I know you won't understand all I'm trying to say now until after you give birth," the little girl explained. "Neon deceived me," Dora said bitterly. "I'm sorry if that's how you see it, but things will soon get better," the little girl reassured her. Dora wiped her tears with the back of her palm, muttering a thank you to the girl. "I must leave now," the little girl said with a smile, and then disappeared. Dora wasn't even herself. She paced back and forth, dropping tears of pain, hurt and heartbreak, and then finally sat on the floor after standing for about an hour, thinking about what to do next. That morning, she decided to go to the river to sing, hoping Neon would show up so they could talk. On reaching the river, Dora first sat by the water, throwing stones and staring into it, trying to calm herself down in case Neon showed up. She was ready to confront him if that was possible. She started singing, and she sang for almost half an hour without a sign of him. She was in tears, tears of so much pain. Dora stood up to leave when he wouldn't come out, and she remembered the necklace she had around her neck. She immediately took it off and threw it into the river. But as soon as she turned to leave, she heard a voice. "Wait," the person said, and Dora looked back swiftly. Lo and behold, it was Neon. She felt like ripping him apart as anger had transformed her face, now looking like a wounded beast. But she had to take caution and stop overreacting when it crossed her mind that he was a god, and not human. "I am sorry," Neon managed to say, stretching forth the necklace she had thrown into the water. "It's yours," he added. "No, it's yours, or you can give it to Nenny instead," Dora said tearfully. "Look, Dora, I can explain," Neon pleaded. "I no longer need your explanation, River God. Of what use is it?" Dora asked, and then turned to leave. "Dora, I know I betrayed you, but it's not what you think. I wish I could explain to you how it is, but you're only human, Neon said. Yes, more reason why I was impregnated and abandoned by a river god. You know I can't challenge you or do anything, even if I wanted to, because you're not human, so please, enjoy your marriage, Dora said, and then walked out. I wish I could make you understand, Dora, Neon called out at the top of his voice. But Dora was no longer interested in whatever he had to say. She left there in tears that she couldn't control, wailing. And then she was distracted by something. Dora saw a rare-looking, colourful and beautiful bird perched on a tiny stone along the bush path. Immediately she smiled and wiped her tears. The bird flew up and then perched on her shoulder. She caught it and stared into its beautiful eyes, but it flew again and then perched on a small tree close by. She went there, caught it, but it flew away again and then perched on another tree. Dora still went after it. After catching it for the last time, as soon as she turned to leave with the bird still in her palms, there stood Nenny and her grandmother in white silky attire, close to her. How dare you? Her grandmother questioned, with smoke visibly coming out from her eyes. Dora froze, trembling with fear. She opened and closed her mouth trying to say something, but was too scared to utter a word. So, you, a common human, are pregnant for Neon. A god? Nenny said, scanning Dora from head to toe. That child must not be birthed. The pregnancy must be gotten rid of here and now, said Nenny's grandmother. Dora looked at her, still visibly shaking, and then at Nenny, trying to read the expressions on their faces to see if Nenny's grandmother actually meant what she said. But her expressionless face, with the fixed gaze, confirmed it all. Please, have mercy, Dora said in a trembling tone, stepping back. It is too late, the grandmother said, and then stretched forth one of her arms towards Dora. Dora went on her knees immediately, begging the grandmother to have mercy, but she seemed uninterested in her pleas. Dora looked around to see if she could find anyone, but they were all alone. Somebody please help! Dora screamed at the top of her voice. How dare you! The grandmother asked again, now staring at her. Somebody help! Dora screamed, looking around. Immediately, the little girl appeared, standing before her. Stay away from my mother! The little girl exclaimed, giving them a very devilish look. You little brat, how dare you challenge me, said Nenny's grandmother. Let my mother go now, the little girl demanded. Oh, I see. So you already exist from the future, said the old woman. That is not the issue here. You both should stay away from my mother, else you will face shame and disgrace. I don't care which goddess you are, you will not like me, the little girl threatened. The old woman turned and looked at Nenny, and they both burst out laughing. You little brat, how dare you? You that's not even sure of your existence yet. If you love your tiny life, better back off. This battle is too heavy for your tiny head, Nenny lashed out. I do not want to exchange powers with you, but please, we must leave now, said the little girl to both of them. With the old woman's hand still stretched forth, she dropped it all of a sudden, and Dora fell on her back. Leave her alone, exclaimed the little girl. You know what, I think I'll have to put an end to your existence, said the old woman. She looked into the sky, and immediately lightning struck with a heavy sound of thunder. She looked down at the little girl, and all of a sudden, Dora saw lightning descending live, almost striking the little girl on her chest. But to her surprise, the little girl grabbed it before her very eyes and flung it aside. Dora's jaw dropped in awe. Oh, I see, said the old woman with a grin. Back off, you two! Leave my mother alone! The little girl shouted. All of a sudden, water started coming out from the ground beside Dora, and before she knew what was happening, it was already covering them both. The little girl rushed to Dora and started pulling her out of the water. But Dora realized that she couldn't move her legs. She was stuck. The little girl tried all she could to pull Dora out, but none of her efforts were working, and she couldn't get out either. You will both drown in that water. I know that you also have powers of your own, but at this point you've become powerless. And as for you, young girl, in your next world, learn to stick to and do things with your kind, said the old woman, and then turned to leave while Nenny followed. Please help me. Please help, Dora whispered, struggling to keep her head out of the water. The water was already covering her head, but they both walked out of there without looking back. The little girl was still trying all she could to rescue both of them, but she was also becoming very weak, as was Dora.
Neon! Neon! Neon!
Dora struggled to call with her head above the water, using her last strength. All of a sudden, he appeared, and as soon as he did, the water dried up on its own. He came closer and touched both of them, and they instantly regained their strength. I'm so sorry for putting you through this, Neon said. But Dora got up and was leaving without a word to him. If you had accepted back the necklace, they wouldn't have been able to harm you, he said. I don't need it, Dora replied, still walking away. You need it, please. I know what I'm saying. These people will still come back for you, but will not be able to touch you if the necklace is around your neck, said the little girl. Dora paused, and Neon walked up to her, putting the necklace on her palm. He had wanted to put it around her neck himself, but she refused, and opened her palm instead. All these will one day make sense to you. Just endure for a few months more, he said. When I'm dead and gone, why did you have to do this to me? Now how am I going to cope with this pregnancy all alone? Dora said in tears. I'm so sorry, but do not worry. All is going to be okay. But you must leave this village. It's no longer safe for you, Neon added, and Dora's eyes widened immediately. I don't understand. I'm so tired of all this already. Maybe I should just get rid of this pregnancy and have peace, Dora lamented. Don't you dare, the little girl threatened all of a sudden. The fact that I accepted to come to you does not make me a fool. I saw all you were going through, all the suffering, and I decided to come and wipe your tears away. And now you're suggesting this? She raged. You will relocate to the next village. I've made provisions for you over there already, said Neon, his voice filled with concern and determination. If you've enjoyed the story so far, please drop a comment below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell notification so you won't miss any updates. What? Dora exclaimed. Neon replied, Yes, you have to relocate from this village as soon as possible. To which of the neighboring villages? Dora asked. The one under the protection of the deity. You must also wear this necklace around your neck at all times, and ensure you don't remove it for any reason, Neon instructed. Dora questioned, The village under the protection of the deity? I am not one of them, so how do I survive there? The king is my friend, and I already informed him of your coming, Neon explained. Dora looked at Neon and shook her head, laughing. So, why do you suddenly care about my well-being? She asked with a smile. Neon responded, Look, Dora, I still care about you, and I want you to be safe with this pregnancy. Nenny and her grandmother will be back for you as soon as they find out that you didn't die. Dora breathed out with her head bowed, then looked up. Okay, I need to go home and inform my stepmother. I can't just leave this village like that without informing anyone, she said. At this point, the little girl who had been staring at both of them suddenly spoke up. I don't understand you. Why are you always like this? Why are you acting as if your life isn't precious to you? You want to go and inform your stepmother so that when those people go into the village to look for you, your stepmother will now tell them where you are. Or what exactly is your plan? Dora sighed, looking at both of them. Okay then, I'm in, she said. So, should I leave now? I need to leave now because the village is quite far from here. You don't have to walk there, you know, Neon said, and then turned to the little girl. Please, take her there, he instructed. The little girl then walked slowly to Dora. Give me your hand, she said, and Dora quickly complied. They were about to leave when they heard a deep voice from the wind. How dare you? The voice questioned, and suddenly Nenny's grandmother stood there with Nenny behind her, both keeping straight faces. Go now! Neon yelled, and almost immediately Dora found herself at the entrance of the village under the protection of the deity, with the little girl beside her. There were palm fronds tied from one tree to another across the road leading into the village. How did you do that? Dora asked, stunned. But the little girl smiled and urged them to go into the village. As soon as they passed the palm fronds, now stepping into the village, Nini's grandmother appeared before the entrance, raging in anger. Let's run! Dora said to the little girl as she was ready to sprint out of there. No need, the little girl said, staring at the old woman who was raging and moving in a circular motion, speaking in a language that Dora didn't understand. What? Let's get out of here before she comes, Dora insisted. Like I said, no need, the little girl repeated. But why? Dora probed as she was already trembling in fear. The little girl explained, this village is protected by the strongest deity in all the kingdoms. No one with evil intentions crosses the palm fronds tied there. Her heart is not pure. That's why she can't come in. Wow, I have never heard of this all my life, Dora said, looking around. Let's go, the little girl said, and they turned around to leave into the village. You must surely pay for this, the old woman screamed in a thunderous tone, but they ignored her and proceeded. They arrived at the village, and Dora asked the little girl where exactly they were going from there. The girl suggested that they first go to the palace. As soon as the king set his eyes on them, he stood up from his throne, walking towards them. Dora was kind of scared and surprised at the same time, and she whispered to the little girl, What's going on? Just be quiet, the little girl replied. The king walked up to them, staring deeply into Dora's eyes. She was so frightened that she turned and looked at the little girl, and then at the king. Are you Dora? The king queried, pointing a finger at her. Dora nodded sporadically. Yes, I am Dora, she confirmed. She's here! The king screamed all of a sudden, and Dora almost passed out upon hearing that. Her heart started beating so fast that she stood there almost peeing on herself. Immediately, drums were rolled out, and in the blink of an eye, celebration had begun. Dora became so shocked and confused, and she whispered to the little girl, asking her what was going on. You're being celebrated. That's what's going on, the little girl whispered back with a smile. Me? Dora asked incredulously. Yes, the little girl whispered again with a grin. Dora was given a seat close to the king, while the elders all greeted her honorably, and the subjects all bowed to her. All these things felt like a dream, and she was pinching herself back to reality. No one saw the little girl except Dora. She stood by her throughout the celebration. Dora couldn't even eat the food that was presented before her. She was still scared to do so. "Eat," the king kept saying, but Dora kept replying with a smile. Little by little, villagers started to gather to dance and also make merry. The king never stopped telling them that they had an important stranger who wanted to come into the village to stay, and Dora was welcomed with warm smiles. After the whole celebration, the king took Dora into a modern building close to the house and said that it was her place. Stunned, Dora walked around the house in disbelief, and she again stood before the king with a dropped jaw. "This house, for me, and who to stay?" she asked to be sure of what she had heard. The king replied, "Just you. Neon himself appeared to me in the early hours of today, telling me about you and everything you have been through." Immediately, Dora fell on her knees, crying and thanking him for what he had done. "Is this a dream or something? Look who's going to be staying in this beautiful house," Dora said to the little girl, smiling from ear to ear, still on her knees. The little girl smiled back, but as soon as Dora noticed that the king was not aware of the little girl's presence, she became so ashamed, and also thought that the king could think that she wasn't normal. She tried to compose herself, but could no longer do so. Your Highness, I'm just overjoyed, and that display was how I usually express myself whenever I am happy," Dora said, scratching her head. "Do not worry, I understand everything, Marmin," the king replied with a smile. The king took Dora into the house. She had never stayed in such a big and beautiful house all her life. The house had 5 bedrooms, with each room having its own bathroom and restroom. "You will stay here until you finally decide to leave. And if you choose to remain here, it's your choice to make," the king said with a broad smile. "Thank you, Your Highness," Dora said again, falling on her knees. The king left, and Dora was left alone with the little girl. "I just can't believe my eyes and ears," Dora said, as hot tears dripped down her face. The little girl responded, "This is just a little, compared to what is to come." "I hope I don't get to regret all this later?" Dora asked. "Just be careful, and always be alert," the little girl said with a fixed gaze. "I don't understand that. I hope I am safe here," Dora asked again with curiosity. "Yes, you are. But make sure you don't leave this village for any reason until you finally give birth," the little girl advised. "I shouldn't leave this place. What if it's an emergency?" Dora probed. "That emergency will take care of itself," the little girl said, with a fixed gaze, and then turned to Dora. "My time here is up for now, and I must leave. I have brought you to a safe place, and you will not get to see me again until you give birth." "What?" Dora exclaimed. "I'm sorry. I have completed my assignment for now, but will be back to you permanently," the little girl explained. As soon as Dora heard that, she burst into tears. "You mean you're going to leave me all alone in this strange place?" "You will be safe and fine, till we meet again," the little girl said, waving at Dora. "Please wait," Dora said, but before she knew it, the little girl had disappeared. Dora wept bitterly on that particular day, so much that she couldn't even eat until the next day. Maids were bringing food and all sorts of things to her, but she didn't even lift a finger for days. Exactly 8 days into her stay in the village, the king assigned a personal maid and a guard to Dora. They prepared her meals and also followed her wherever she wanted to go within the village. Dora was given a chieftaincy title by the king, and whenever she visited the market, She was always given foodstuffs for free. One day, exactly 7 months into her pregnancy, Dora came out of her house that morning and saw a strange face dressed in white standing before her door. "Good day," the person in white greeted. Stepping out of her room with eyes still glued to him, Dora had never seen that face before. It was a man in his 40s, tall, dark in complexion, and carrying an afro hairstyle. He was wearing a white long-sleeve top with a pair of white trousers. He was staring at Dora and smiling as if they had met before. "Who are you?" Dora finally voiced out. "You don't know me, but I'm from Neon," he said with a smile. "Neon? Okay," Dora said in a hurry. He dipped his hand into his pocket and brought out something wrapped in a black nylon. "Take," he said, stretching forth his hand. Dora took it from him, untied it, and lo and behold, it was a bundle of money. She smiled and was putting the black nylon under her armpit when he spoke again. "He said to tell you congratulations in advance," the man said with a smile. "Congratulations in advance? For what?" Dora asked, smiling, with her other hand on her waist. "I only delivered a message. Take care of yourself," he said, and then turned, walking away. Dora shook her head as the congratulatory message kept ringing in her ear, wondering what Neon was up to this time. Suddenly, she heard the man's voice again from afar, but his message wasn't clear enough. "I can't hear you!" Dora screamed. "Leave your door open tonight," he said at the top of his voice, but Dora refused to answer him when she finally heard him. Instead, she stood confused and at the same time wondering why he had said what he said. "What does that mean?" Dora asked herself while returning inside. A few hours later at dusk, it started to rain heavily. Dora was having a backache and lower abdominal pain, so she retired to her room to rest a little. She usually locked her doors since she came into the village. She didn't know why, but her door was always locked whenever she was in, while her maid and guard each had their own room. That evening, before lying down to rest, Dora was going to lock her door from the inside, but immediately remembered what the stranger had told her. She was skeptical at first, thinking to herself if the man actually meant well or otherwise. "Evil does not survive here, so let me leave the door open like he instructed," Dora said to herself, and then laid down. She woke up later in the middle of the night with extreme abdominal cramps. She couldn't even get up or move her legs. Her legs had become numb. It was still raining heavily, and she started to scream her maid's name, but the maid didn't hear her. She screamed her guard's name too, but he didn't hear her. Dora tried all she could to get up, but couldn't, and instead, the pains became more intense. "Help!" she screamed at the top of her voice with all her strength, but there was no response from anyone. After about 30 seconds, 3 middle-aged women walked into Dora's room, each carrying a calabash full of water with different leaves in them. As soon as Dora saw them, she was shocked, her eyes popping open as her heart began racing so fast. "Do not be afraid, we are midwives," they said, approaching her. "Midwives?" Dora asked, groaning in pain. She never would have imagined that she could be in labor after 7 months of being pregnant. She was expecting the baby at 9 months. Dora was in so much pain that she couldn't wait for them to put an end to whatever was making her feel that way, without even bothering to ask them how they knew she was in labor. They surrounded her, picked a wrapper from her bag just beside the bed, and then spread it before her on the bed. Dora was groaning in pain, begging them to please bring the baby out. The woman who stood directly before her picked some leaves from her own calabash of water, sprinkled it on Dora, and immediately the pain disappeared. But there was something stuck between Dora's legs. Dora became so scared, and the woman who was standing before her came close and started rubbing her stomach. All of a sudden, the baby popped out into the woman's waiting and already spread palms without any pain. As soon as the women saw the baby, they looked at each other and immediately fell on their knees. Dora was shocked and curious to know why they all fell on their knees, so she stretched her neck to look at the baby. Lo and behold, the baby's eyes were as shiny as the sun. Dora screamed as soon as she saw the baby's eyes, and the women who were on their knees looked up immediately. "Please, stop screaming," one of them said, and they all stood up. Another brought out leaves from her calabash of water and started sprinkling it around the room, pouring out blessings as she did. "May you live long, and may your birth bring forth bountiful blessings," she intoned. The whole thing looked mysterious to Dora as she sat there on the bed, still so shocked and confused. She had met her child from the future long before she was born, but that child didn't have eyes as shiny as these. The women all poured out blessings in turns, and when they were done, the one carrying the baby handed her over to Dora after cleaning her up. Dora was so scared to carry her at first, but had to summon some courage. "We shall be back by morning," one of them said as they picked up the calabashes they had dropped on the floor and then turned to leave. "But wait," Dora said. "Please, where are you from again, and how did you know that I was in labor?" One of the women replied, "We are not ordinary midwives. We are midwives of the gods, but we reside here. Whenever anyone around here is in labor, we don't need to be told, as we see and also hear directly from the gods." "But how come her eyes are like this?" Dora asked. "Her?" one of them asked, and they all turned and looked at each other. "Were you expecting a girl?" "I knew even before I gave birth to her that she was a girl. The reason her eyes are like this is what I don't understand," Dora explained. One of them giggled and then looked at Dora. "Well, it's a boy," she said with a smile. "No, it can't be. I'm sure it's a girl. I even met her before she was born. Or is it possible that you people didn't check the gender properly?" Dora asked, already handing the baby over to one of them. She collected the baby and then unwrapped it for Dora to see. Lo and behold, it was a boy. Dora's jaw dropped immediately as she looked confusedly at each of them. "No, this isn't my child. Is it possible that you people made some sort of mistake?" Dora questioned. They turned and looked at each other again. "Mistake?" they all asked in chorus. "We never make mistakes. Besides, you were the only pregnant woman here, so it's not even possible that the baby was exchanged with that of another person," one of them explained. "I'm telling you what I know. This child can't be mine," Dora yelled. "I'm sorry, but it's yours and we must leave now," the one who took the baby said to Dora, dropping him on the bed. They were already on their way out when Dora managed to get up, carried the baby, and hurried after them with the baby in her arms. It was then her maid and guard rushed out of their rooms, but the women had already stepped out of the house when her guard came outside. It was still raining heavily. Dora was outside screaming at the top of her voice, trying to stop them, but they entered the rain and left. Dora's guard ran after them in the rain, but later got back drenched. She asked him if he knew the women or the direction they went, but he said they had already vanished before he got out of the compound. They said they were midwives of the gods. "I need to tell them that this isn't my baby," Dora said to him as he stood before her panting. "Midwives of the gods? What did they come here to do?" he asked with curiosity. I was in labor and I gave birth a few minutes ago. I kept screaming your and the maid's names, but none of you heard me, Dora explained. That can't be true, he said. It is. But this baby isn't mine, Dora said, showing them the baby. As soon as he saw the child, he fell on his knees while the maid froze. What's going on? Dora asked him. This child is a very powerful one. This is either a child of a god or a child from the gods, he said, still on his knees. He isn't mine. I know my child, Dora insisted. Are you serious about this? But there was no other pregnant woman in the room when you gave birth, said the maid. I know, but I know what I'm saying, Dora replied. We'll need to see the king by dawn then, the guard suggested. Not just the king. I need to go and see Neon too as soon as possible, because I don't understand what's going on, Dora said. When dawn arrived, Dora wrapped the baby in one of her new wrappers and carried him in her arms. She didn't want to go with either the guard or the maid, so she sneaked out of the house without their knowledge. She didn't want any villager to see her either. So she took the narrow bush path and later arrived at the entrance of the village, where palm fronds were tied to 2 trees, as that was the only exit too. She paused, contemplating whether to go ahead or not. But I was asked not to leave this village yet, and if I don't leave, how do I confirm if this child is truly mine? Should I do this or not? Dora asked herself. Don't. If you leave here, that will be the end of you, she heard suddenly. The voice came from the baby. Dora had never been so shocked in all her life. She froze and started to shiver, almost dropping the baby on the ground. What else do you want to confirm? I came as a girl, and I decided to come back as a boy this time for a reason. Leaving this village will only put your life at risk, he said again, and at this point, Dora was almost going to scream. Dora, go back to your home. You already have answers to that which you seek, he said again. Dora was too scared to utter a word. She turned swiftly and headed straight home. She couldn't also look at him, but she noticed that his gaze was fixed on her until they got home. On reaching home, Dora noticed that her guard and maid were already outside the house, pacing back and forth. As soon as they saw her, they ran toward her. We have been so worried. We agreed to go see the king as soon as it was dawn, but I've been searching everywhere for you, said her guard, standing before her. Are you okay? Asked her maid, who noticed that everything wasn't well with Dora. Yes, I am okay, Dora stuttered. Please, take the child, she said, handing him over. The maid carried him with smiles, staring directly into his shiny eyes, and then paused all of a sudden, looking up as if she was going to say something. What are you staring at? The baby asked all of a sudden, freaking her out so much that she almost flung him aside. Dora was smart enough to have grabbed him immediately from her. The maid ran out of the compound screaming at the top of her voice. The guard stood there, confused and frightened, broadening his chest and looking from side to side like one who was escaping from something. Then he summoned some courage to ask, "The first time I saw this baby, I knew he was going to be a very powerful child. But was he the one who spoke just now?" Dora was so embarrassed and already feeling so uncomfortable that she nodded her head sporadically and hurried into the room. She dropped him on the bed immediately, bolted her door from behind, and stood before him crying, wondering about the kind of shame she was about to go through if the villagers eventually found out that her newborn talked. You don't need to feel that way, you know? You don't just know what's coming or has come to you yet, the baby said. Dora almost ran out of her room screaming too, but had to control herself. Is this some sort of joke or what? Where exactly are you from? I don't think I'm ready to face this shame. Why don't you just go back to wherever it is that you came from? Dora asked in tears. If I decide to go back to wherever I came from, do you think that you will be able to fight this battle ahead of you alone? The baby probed. Who exactly are you? Dora asked. Like I said, I came into your life once as a girl, but this time I decided to come as a boy because Nenny and her grandmother already knew that you were going to have a baby girl. This is all Neon's plan. I know that Nenny's grandmother is a goddess, but with what Neon already did to me, she won't find out in a hurry that my gender was changed, the baby explained. Dora burst into tears again as soon as she heard that. But I thought that I would be free from pains and all these after having you. Am I ever going to be free from all these? She questioned. The battle is almost over, Dora, he said. For the first time since she birthed him, Dora felt the urge to carry him and give him a hug, which she did, and also planted a kiss on his forehead. He responded by smiling. And then, Dora started to hear voices from outside the compound. The voices began to approach until they entered the compound. We must see the baby. We must see the talking baby, she heard people chanting. Dora was so afraid initially, but the baby said to her, Welcome to the first phase of triumph. She didn't understand what that meant and was going to ask him when she started to hear the king's voice. She became a bit relieved and dropped him on the bed, quickly unbolting the door. The king walked into Dora's room, and as soon as he saw her, his jaw dropped in awe. You gave birth, and you didn't even bother to send either your guard or your maid to inform me? On hearing that, Dora fell on her knees and started to apologize to him, but he asked her to get up, saying it was fine. Can I carry him? The king asked, smiling. Dora rushed up immediately, carried the baby from the bed, and was about to hand him over. But to her surprise, as soon as the king saw him, he removed his crown and knelt immediately before the baby. Dora stood there, stunned and confused, as the king knelt before her newborn child. The room fell silent for a moment, the only sound being the murmurs of the crowd outside. Dora was stunned with wide, astonished eyes. Your Highness, please don't do this, she said, also kneeling before him. Please get up. Do not kneel with the baby before me, he said, bowing his head. Your Highness, I don't understand all this. How can a king be kneeling before a newborn baby and me? Get up, please. I can see you don't understand yet. He shouldn't be kneeling before me. It ought to be the other way around, he said. Your Highness, please. Dora attempted to say more, but the king immediately cut in. Get up now. It's an order, yelled the king, and Dora stood immediately, still shocked and surprised to see him kneeling before them. You see this child you're carrying? He's a very powerful child, and a reincarnation too. The only person I knew who had such eyes was Neon's father, and I'm sure this is him. He returned to Earth, but this time he returned through you. When he was alive, no human dared to speak when he spoke. He wasn't just a river god. He was more than that because everyone around this kingdom worshipped him. The king revealed, still on his knees. But Your Highness, even though this is strange, this child came to me in the form of a girl when I first conceived him. I almost left this village to ask Neon some questions because it seemed the baby was exchanged as I was expecting a baby girl, according to what I saw. But the child told me that he decided to come this time in the form of a boy, and everything was orchestrated by Neon to disguise him from those who were after us. The king looked at Dora with surprise. "The child speaks?" he asked, staring deeply into her eyes. "Yes, he spoke to me," Dora said, nodding. "Can I carry him?" asked the king, stretching forth his arms. "Yes, you can," Dora said, handing the baby over. The king, still on his knees, started to eulogize the baby, who smiled back in response. "May your reign be long," said the baby, and the king bowed to receive the blessing. When the baby finished blessing him, the king stood up with the baby still in his arms and dashed out of Dora's room while she ran after him. "Roll out the drums, kill the fattest cows, and let's make merry. The river god is back, and of all the villages around this kingdom, he chose our village," the king screamed joyfully. Dora followed him, going wherever he went, unable to believe her eyes and ears. Villagers started to gather, drummers beat drums, dancers danced, and palm wine tappers filled the cups of everyone who cared to take palm wine for free. After the feast, they returned home, and the king assigned 2 more guards and 2 more maids to Dora. Wherever Dora went, respect increased. Men, women, and even children would never walk past her without kneeling. Every market day, people brought foodstuffs to her place for free. After 7 days, the king summoned Dora to the palace, and she went with the baby. She saw someone familiar in the palace, but couldn't place where they had met before. "Dora, this young man is here from your village," the king said, pointing at the young man. Dora's heart skipped. "Young man, please let her know why you are here," added the king. The young man fell to his knees immediately. "Dora, you're summoned by the king and the chief priest. The king asked me to tell you that since you have given birth, you must return to the village immediately to resolve the case that is still pending," he said. Dora stared at him in confusion. "What case?" she asked. "Remember that you were once told by the king that after you gave birth, you must swear before everyone that you did not kill your stepbrother," he said, and Dora's jaw dropped in awe. Dora had forgotten that something like that was even discussed, but she mustn't be allowed to leave the village. That was the instruction. "I had totally forgotten, but I'm sorry, I can't go with you. The instruction says I mustn't leave this village for any reason for my safety, but I promise that as soon as I'm allowed to go out, I will come and do the needful," she said. "I'm sorry I didn't send myself here. The king sent me. You must prove your innocence, otherwise the repercussions will be dangerous," he said. "Please try to understand me," Dora said, but the baby cut in. "We will be there in 3 days," said the baby, and the young man's jaw dropped in awe. He started to look around. "Sorry to ask, but I just heard someone speak. The voice was like that of a little child," said the young man, turning and looking around. "It's my baby," Dora said. "No, I heard a child's voice," he repeated. Dora told him again that it was her baby. He became uncomfortable and frightened. I must leave now," he said, got up and hurried out of the palace. "At least take water," the king screamed, but the young man sprinted away. "We shall be there in 3 days. You must go," said the baby. "But you once told me never to leave here no matter what," Dora said to him. "Yes, I said so, but power has changed hands." On the 3rd day, Dora woke up early to prepare for the journey. She visited the palace with the baby, accompanied by one of her maids and all her guards. The king gave them his blessings, and they proceeded out of the village. When they reached the exit, where palm fronds were tied to 2 trees, the baby made them pause, asked Dora to cut a few palm fronds from the ones tied to the trees and wrap them around her head. Then they proceeded to her village. As soon as they entered the villagers who saw Dora first couldn't believe their eyes. They stood stunned, watching the hefty guards march after her. They couldn't tell if she was in danger or not, knowing Dora had a talking baby. She waved at some, and some waved back, but others couldn't raise their hands, too busy watching the parade, unable to tell what kind of person she had become. Arriving at the palace, the king had been informed that Dora now had a talking baby. He stood up as soon as he saw them approaching and couldn't wait for them to come close before asking questions. How come? How did you come across a talking baby? That is an abomination, he said, but Dora ignored him. She approached, knelt before him, and handed the maid the baby. Some people were already gathered, including the chief priest, Dora's stepmother, and her eldest daughter. The king didn't respond to her greeting. "How did you come across a talking baby?" he asked again. "Your Highness, I have been saying it to everyone's hearing that this girl is possessed. Can an ordinary human birth a baby that talks?" Dora's stepmother said from where she sat. Dora turned, looking at her, and smiled, shaking her head. Suddenly the baby called the chief priest's name. The people screamed with mouths agape, and the chief priest turned swiftly, now facing the baby. The chief priest moved closer to the baby, peeped at him, and then bowed his head. "I don't understand. What is the meaning of this? Why are you bowing for a baby?" asked the king furiously. "Your Majesty, please come take a look," said the chief priest. The king marched forward majestically, looked at the maid carrying the baby, and then looked at the baby. Suddenly, he removed his crown and fell to his knees. This act made people scream in chorus, and to pay respect to their king, they too fell to their knees, except Dora's stepmother, who stood there dumbfounded. "I didn't recognize you until I saw you. Please forgive me," pleaded the king. "Rise," said the baby, and the king rose. The king took the baby from the maid and immediately ordered his guards to kill the fattest livestock. Again, everyone made merry, with enough to eat and even leftovers. However, Dora's stepmother and her daughter refused to eat, sitting alone for hours. A few hours later, people were still around. Dora's stepmother approached the king, knelt before him, and reminded him of the reason everyone was present, not to jubilate or make merry. The king shunned her, asking her to leave the palace, but the baby refused to let her go just like that. "Don't you think it is time to confess all your evil deeds yet?" asked the baby. Dora's stepmother stood up swiftly and started shaking visibly. "I haven't done anything. I haven't done anything," she repeated, spreading her palms wide. "Care to tell everyone here the reason your son died? Or do you want me to tell them for you?" Hearing that, everyone was stunned. People started turning and looking at each other, whispering. Suddenly, Dora's stepmother hurried to her daughter, grabbed her by the hand, and they sprinted out of the palace. The chief priest asked the guards to bring them back, and the king's guards ran after them, bundling them back into the palace. "Your Highness, I know nothing about my stepbrother's death. Let the earth bear me witness," Dora said with both hands in the air. "I understand better now," said the king. He turned to look at Dora's stepmother, already on her knees, scared, panting, and shivering. The king commanded sternly, "Woman, I command you to speak up this minute. What do you know about the death of your son?" As soon as her stepmother heard those words, she burst into tears. Your Majesty, please, I am so sorry. I killed my son, she said tearfully, and everyone screamed in shock. May we know why you killed him? Asked the chief priest. He refused to listen to me. When Dora woke up from the dead during that period she died, I left home with my children to my own village. I went to a native doctor there and took a charm in a bid to silence Dora completely because she was becoming a thorn in my flesh and I needed the necklace so badly. But I don't know what suddenly came over my son. He threatened to inform Dora and the king about it, so I poisoned him and then went back to the chief priest for another charm, so that people, even the chief priest, would not find out that I was the one behind his death. As soon as her stepmother mentioned that, everyone screamed in disbelief. It's a lie, Dora exclaimed all of a sudden. Her stepmother turned to face her. Dora, I'm so sorry for everything I've done to you. Please forgive me, she said as tears flowed down her face. Mama, I forgave you a very long time ago. I have nothing against you, Dora replied. Her daughter, now deeply embarrassed, knelt in the crowd, crying and covering her face. This is my pronouncement, said the king after calling for everyone's attention. For all the evil you have committed here in this village, and for making your own stepdaughter go through all she went through without any form of remorse from you, and for falsely accusing her of a crime she knew nothing about, you shall be dragged to the market square, and under the watch of everyone, you shall be beheaded. The king pronounced, and everybody screamed again, but Dora wasn't okay with such a pronouncement. Despite being treated badly, she could never wish such a death for her stepmother. Dora fell to her knees and started pleading for mercy before the king, already in tears, telling him that she didn't want her stepmother's blood on her hands. If her stepmother was eventually beheaded, no one would talk about it without making reference to her. But the king remained adamant. When the king wouldn't listen to her, and her stepmother was already being prepared for her final rest, Dora went to the baby and knelt before him, begging him to please talk to the king, which he did after much pleading. Her stepmother was let go but banished. Her stepmother, stepsister, and Dora all cried, but she later stopped after realizing that her stepmother would still be alive wherever she went, so there was no need to cry. None of them even bothered to say thank you. But Dora didn't let that bother her at all. She just let them be. They were both escorted out of the palace with ashes poured on their bodies from head to toe. Since the mother is leaving, the daughter too must leave, the women kept chanting as Dora watched her stepmother and stepsister being humiliated out of the palace. She wept bitterly. An hour later, it was time for them to leave the village. The king thanked them for honoring his invitation and gave them numerous gifts, including gold and silver, and also provided maids and guards to help carry their loads. On their way back to the village, Nenny and her grandmother appeared before them all of a sudden. Dora froze, scared, but she summoned some courage, realizing she was with a powerful child. Finally, we meet again, said Nenny's grandmother, approaching slowly with Nenny following behind. So that little brat has finally been birthed, said Nenny with a smile. Dora kept her cool without a word. They marched forward, now standing before Dora, and Nenny looked into her eyes with a devilish smile. How dare you, Dora? First you dated Neon, and now you have a new baby for a water god. You, a mere mortal, dared to go close to my man. What insolence! Nenny raged. Suddenly she looked down and saw the baby wrapped in a white shawl, and she screamed. Her grandmother, upon hearing the scream, looked at the baby and immediately fell to her knees. Do you know the mysterious thing? that happened on that particular day? I'll tell you. Suddenly, the baby rose from the shawl, and right before their eyes, he transformed into an old man in his 80s, with grey hair and grey beards. Even the hair on his skin was grey. Dora's maid and guards took to their heels, screaming at the top of their voices. She had never seen such a thing in her life. Dora started to shiver and almost peed herself, but she decided not to run like the rest. She just stood there, watching with her mouth agape. "Is this how you have become?" the old man roared, walking around Nenny and her grandmother, who were still on their knees. "Oppressing humans just because you possess some powers they don't? I am so ashamed of you. Henceforth, I will ensure you cease to be a river goddess, and a very young lady will take over from you to teach you a lesson," he added. "And as for you, Nenny, henceforth, you will cease to have any form of relationship with Neon, my son. You will no longer be seen close to him, and both you and your grandmother will never be able to come out of the water again." After hearing all he said, Dora's eyes popped when she realized that the old man was Neon's father. "Rise and get lost, you two," the old man roared in anger, and Nenny and her grandmother disappeared into thin air immediately. He turned and saw Dora standing there visibly shaking, and then he smiled. "Do not be afraid. Be calm," he said, rubbing his chest and still smiling. His set of teeth were so white and intact, and his grey hair and beards well combed and arranged, including his hairlines. "Follow me," he said. But Dora was skeptical about whether to do so or not. She turned and looked left and right. It was just her and him. "Should I?" she asked in whispers, pointing at herself to be sure of what she had heard. "Come on, follow me. Let me show you around," said the old man again. Dora stood there, contemplating what he was asking her to do, but his hand was already stretched forth. Slowly, she walked up to him, and he took her hand. At that moment, she quickly and quietly said her last prayers as they began to walk to an unknown destination. "You see, I'm aware of your feelings for my son, Neon. I know you love him so much and would wish to spend the rest of your life with him," he said, exhaling and shaking his head. "The only mistake I made throughout my existence was having Nenny and Neon betrothed. Let me tell you a secret. Did you know that Nenny's mother was also a human just like you?" "No," Dora said, surprised to hear what he just mentioned. "Yes, she was. She conceived Nenny with Nenny's father, who was also from the water and a child of a river goddess. Nenny's father was so scared of his mother, this same Nenny's grandmother, that he couldn't tell her that a human girl was pregnant with his child. Nenny's parents were deeply in love and seemed inseparable. When Nenny's grandmother discovered that a human was pregnant with her son's child, she was so mad that she almost attacked Nenny's mother and her people. But word reached me, and I immediately put a stop to her plans of attacking them." "What?" Dora exclaimed. "So?" she asked eagerly. "The goddess sent her son to deliver a message in another kingdom one morning. Before he returned, Nenny's mother had been sent out of the water. Not only that, the goddess took the baby from her and made Nenny's mother's people disappear to a place where her son couldn't find them. When her son returned, he combed the village for the love of his life and her people, but neither were found. Her initial plan was to kill them all, but for fear of being dethroned by me, she made them go missing instead." "What?" Dora exclaimed again. "So?" she asked again. "When her son couldn't find his love and her people, he returned to the water. A few days later, he also disappeared without a trace. Even to this day, no one knows if Nenny's real parents are alive or dead. But why didn't you do anything about the whole situation at the time? Everything was hidden from me by the goddess, unknown to her that I was aware. Since no one brought the issue to my notice, I allowed it to remain so, he said with a smile. This is so unbelievable. So Nenny is half human? Dora asked. Of course. So, do you know where her parents are? Are they still alive? They are, but I wouldn't want to tell anyone where they currently are. In fact, they are not only alive, but happily married with children. They walked for a few more minutes and later arrived at the river. As soon as they arrived at the river, Neon somehow got the information that his father was around and appeared almost immediately in the water, beaming with smiles. Dora watched as they hurried toward each other and shared a big hug, smiling from ear to ear. Neon began to cry. They talked for almost an hour, and Neon apologized for all he had done wrong. When they were finished, right there by the river, the old man told Dora to bring him back to the river in 7 days, and then he transformed back into a baby. After changing into a baby, he floated on the river like a mere leaf. Dora began to shiver again, because she didn't know if it would be okay to carry him back home. Will I be able to take care of him now that I've confirmed it's Neon's father? She kept asking herself, standing there dumbfounded. Come on, carry a baby, Neon said, pointing at the baby who seemed unbothered and was smiling at them. I don't know if... The thing is, I'm just so scared, Dora finally voiced. But instead, Neon burst out laughing. Scared of your own baby? I mean, who does that? He teased with folded arms. Ignoring him, Dora went closer to the baby and picked him up. But she was too scared to look into his eyes and tried to avoid any form of eye contact. I must leave now, she said to Neon, unable to look directly at him either. Dora, I know you're still so mad at me, but it's not my fault, please forgive me, he pleaded. I was mad at you, but now I know better. Your father already told me a few things, so I'm just okay with you now, but our friendship is no longer going to be as it used to be. I understand, but I'm glad to at least know that you have forgiven me, he said. Yes, I have, and I must leave now. Not so soon, Dora. There's something I would like to discuss with you, please. As soon as she heard that, Dora sighed. Please, go ahead, she said. Neon walked slowly up to her with both hands behind him, then stood before her and started staring into her eyes. Dora, will you marry me? Please marry me, and let's live comfortably and peacefully together. We already have a seal of our love, remember? He said, pointing at the baby. But Dora couldn't believe what she was hearing. Just like that? Neon? It doesn't work that way. You went completely out of my life and now you want to return simply because your father put an end to whatever was between you and Nenny. It just can't work. Nenny is your betrothed, and you and I are in two different worlds. If you had asked me this a couple of months ago, I would have gladly agreed. But now, I'm so sorry to disappoint you. It's not going to work. But you said you've forgiven me. Look, if I was never in love with you, I wouldn't have gone this far just to protect you, he said. How far did you go, please? She asked. See, I wanted you to be safe from that wicked goddess. That's why I asked you to go to the land under the protection of the gods. And another thing, I wanted my father to come back to life through you, so that the wicked goddess could be served the punishment she deserves. I'm glad it happened exactly the way I wanted it to. I didn't have the power to dethrone her, so I wanted father to do so instead, because if she wasn't dethroned, she and her granddaughter Nenny would have made your life a living hell, even if it meant waiting for 50 years for you to leave the land under the protection of the gods, because you would surely want to be out of there someday, to explore other villages. What? Dora exclaimed. So, what about the little girl? Oh, she's fine. We actually planned it together. We wanted Father to come in her place so he could right some wrongs, so you could be free from all the troubles you were in. That's how much you mean to me, Dora. I can't believe this, she said with a faint smile. Can I see the little girl again? She asked with curiosity. Yes, but in 7 days, he replied. I don't understand. What's with the 7 days? Because something big is going to happen in this kingdom in exactly 7 days from now. You will be allowed to see her by then if you want to, he said. Yes, I just can't wait, she said excitedly. I must leave now, she added, and she turned to leave. Dora, wait, he said, and she paused. He came forward again, made her stretch forth one of her arms and put a few drops of water in her palm. Immediately, she appeared before the entrance of the land protected by the gods. Thank you very much for watching. We have one more amazing episode to go. If you've enjoyed the story so far, please drop a comment below. Don't forget to like, subscribe and turn on the bell notification so you won't miss any updates. Thank you, and remember, we love you. Wow, that was so swift, Dora exclaimed, looking around. She walked past the trees, tied with palm fronds, and just as she was about to enter the village, 2 villagers approaching her saw her and took to their heels. Dora paused, turned, and looked around to see if they were after something, or if something was after them. But she found nothing. She then proceeded home. She walked past a building with people sitting in front of it, seriously chatting and laughing at the top of their voices. As soon as they saw her, they all abandoned what they were doing, ran into their rooms, and shut their doors. Dora paused and looked around again. What's going on? She asked herself, walking home slowly, wondering why the people who saw her reacted the way they did. Almost home, she decided to see the king first to ensure that all was well. Arriving at the palace, the guards started running helter-skelter upon setting eyes on her. She stood confused, her mouth agape. I hope I am still alive, she asked herself, scanning her body from her chest down. If I am still alive, then why is everyone running away? She asked herself. Then the king walked out from his chamber. Dora, I have been expecting you, he said from afar with a smile. Dora walked up to him and knelt before him with the baby still in her arms. May you live long, she said on her knees with her head bowed. Come on, get up. You shouldn't kneel before me whenever you're carrying the baby, please, for I am nobody before him, he said. She stood up and sat on one of the wooden chairs before his throne. As soon as she sat, she opened her mouth to say something but closed it again. Is there something you would like to talk about? He asked with a smile. Yes, Your Highness. I noticed something while walking into the village, she said, adjusting herself on the wooden chair. I don't know why everyone who sees me keeps running away. Oh, that? He asked with a grin. One of the guards who escorted you to the other village came running into the village, screaming at the top of his voice, telling everyone who cared to listen that the baby you are carrying is an old man, not a baby. As soon as she heard that, Dora's jaw dropped in awe. No wonder people kept running away from me. So what do I do now? She asked. Nothing. I will call a meeting and address everyone, telling them that this child isn't just an ordinary child, but a water god. Instead of running away from you both, they should respect you. Anyone who fails to do so will have themselves to blame," he said, rubbing the arm of his throne. Dora was dumbfounded and unable to speak for a few seconds. "Your Highness, I don't really know why you're doing this. What exactly have I done to deserve this kind of kindness from you?" she said, already shedding a tear. He smiled and adjusted himself. "You see, Dora, I'm also doing this because I've somehow been in your shoes before," he said, still rubbing the arm of his throne. "I don't understand," she said with a giggle. "You really want to know?" he quizzed. Yes, she said, nodding eagerly. "I'll tell you. You see, I'm not human like you," he said. "I still don't understand," she said with another giggle. He exhaled and continued. "I don't know if you've been told or heard the story of a river boy who fell in love with a human before. After having a child together, the river boy's mother, who was also a river goddess, made the human come into the water to stay. But it was too difficult for her to cope in the new world, and the goddess was not ready to help. Then one day, the river boy was sent on an errand by his mother, and before he returned, his mother had chased out the love of his life from the water after the baby was forcibly taken from her." "What? Please tell me I am dreaming," Dora exclaimed, fanning herself with one of her hands. "Have you heard something like that before?" he asked, staring at her. "You are Nani's father?" she screamed, and he nodded. "Yes, I am," he said, bowing his head. "Unbelievable. To think that I got to hear the whole story today. The baby transformed into an old man while on our way back to the village and narrated everything to me. I am so sorry about it all. But your daughter is all grown now. Why don't you go back and claim what's yours? Bring her here and take care of her," she probed. "The old man you saw is the most powerful water god in all the kingdoms. And it's not as easy as you think, Dora. She was raised by my mother, and as such, my mother's blood also runs in her veins. If I had made that attempt, my mother would have long destroyed this village that I've built for years now. After I left the river, I went in search of my love, and luckily, I found her, brought her here, and we settled. Other people also started coming to join us, and I must tell you that this place is the most peaceful village in all the kingdoms. Why? Because you see those palm fronds by the entrance? I put them there specifically because of my mother and anyone who has bad intentions and wants to come here to settle. Such people can never set foot in here," he said. "Wow, impressive. So, when are you planning to reclaim your daughter? Or is it not time yet?" Dora asked. "I have been planning for it for a long time now, but that time is finally here. In 7 days' time," he said, raising his head. "In 7 days' time," she repeated, and he nodded. "What's so special about this number 7? Neon's father asked me to return him to the river in 7 days' time. And here you are, using the same number 7. Is there something I should know about it?" she asked with a grin. He laughed out loud, even grabbing his stomach. "Don't tell me you're scared already, or are you?" he quizzed, giggling. "No, Your Highness. I am not. I'm just curious to know," she said, feigning a smile. But deep down, she was somehow scared of what would eventually play out on that same day. She left the palace and returned to her place. As soon as the guards and maids saw the baby and her, they took to their heels. She called each of them by name, but none answered. She went back to the palace to tell the king what had just happened. Immediately, he ordered the town crier to announce around the village that the king wanted to see and talk to everyone about a very important issue. People gathered in no time. The king started by telling everyone who Dora was, and that henceforth, anyone who ran away from the baby and her would be excommunicated for months. People started grumbling as soon as they heard the king, also talking to each other in whispers. When the king was done, Dora left for her place, and the guards and maids started walking slowly into her room, apologizing for their actions. She told them that she had forgiven them, and that it wasn't their fault. Dora couldn't wait for the 7 days to come. In fact, she counted hours, minutes, and even seconds. But the 7 days weren't forthcoming. On the 4th day, something mysterious happened. She was still sleeping that early morning in her room when one of her maids started banging on her door. She jerked up suddenly, her heart almost jumping out of her mouth in fear, and started panting heavily, looking around. Who is there?" she summoned some courage to ask. "It's me! There's something I want to tell you. Please open up!" The maid exclaimed. As soon as Dora heard her voice, she jumped out of bed and went straight to the door, unbolting it. "The baby!" the maid said, pushing Dora aside as she dashed into the room. Dora's eyes travelled to where the baby was lying beside her on the bed, but he was nowhere to be found. "The baby? Where is he?" Dora asked, pointing at the bed and staring at her maid. "That's why I'm here. One of the guards and I went to fetch some herbs from the nearby bush when we saw an old man dressed in white, with grey beards and grey hair. We had to hide behind a tree as soon as we saw him. He walked past us. I was wondering who it was, and was going to ask the guard if he knew who he was, when he told me that it was the same man who had changed form from the baby the day you all were returning to the village, and that it was your baby." "What?" Dora screamed. "Where did you see him?" "That bush path near the market," the maid said. Dora pushed her aside and ran out of the house in search of him, while the maid ran after her, but they couldn't find him there. They both walked from house to house in search of him, describing to both young and old what he looked like just in case they came across him somewhere. But no one seemed to have found him. After about an hour, they were exhausted and famished, so they decided to return home so the maid could at least eat something, while Dora went to the king to tell him what was happening and to ask if he knew the baby's whereabouts. They chose to follow the back road, and, lo and behold, the old man was there. Some children had gathered around him, asking for various things like cars and big houses. The old man told them that as soon as they turned 20, their wishes would come true. After standing there and watching them for a few minutes, the Dora walked up to them. As soon as the old man saw Dora, he smiled. "We have combed almost everywhere around the village in search of you," the Dora said. "You shouldn't have bothered to look for me. I would have returned home, even without you looking for me," the old man replied. "Grandpa, can you make it rain? The heat is too much and the villagers have been praying for rain for a few days now," a boy about 8 years old said, causing the Dora to smile sheepishly at his question. "Yes, we are tired of fetching water every morning from the river," another child said, folding his arms with a squeezed face. "You want rain?" the old man asked, and the children screamed, "Yes," in chorus. "If you do, now run home and tell your mothers to wash their containers so they can fill them up with water," he said with a grin. The children ran home screaming excitedly, and that day, it rained heavily for hours. The 7th day finally came. The Dora was dressed in their best clothing and also dressed the baby in one of the clothes bought from the market for that special occasion. Everyone gathered at the river, including the king and the queen, accompanied by some guards. The Dora never knew that the queen could sing so well. She sang and danced in tears, and when she could no longer continue, Dora decided to continue with the show. Neon appeared as soon as Dora started to sing. Dora sang melodiously, and everyone started dancing, including the baby, who later changed form into the old man. When Dora was done, they were rewarded with 3 precious stones by the old man, the queen, and the king. The old man then informed Dora that he was no longer going to return home with them, and that they should make a wish. "What wish?" Dora asked, already in tears. "Have your father back to life, or the little girl from the future? Which would you choose?" asked the old man. Shocked, Dora looked at everyone present one after the other, and then at the old man. "You're going to give me back my father?" Dora asked, to be sure of what they had heard. "Oh yes, depending on your choice. You either have your father back, or the little girl from the future," he repeated. At that moment, Dora immediately thought about their father, and when they were a little child, and all the times they spent together. The memories of childhood immediately came back. Dora didn't get to enjoy motherly love, as well as fatherly love. But the little time spent with their father was treasured for life. They remembered when he provided for all their needs, how no one in the family dared to maltreat them or speak to them anyhow. Father was always there to protect and defend them. They remembered when they would follow him to the farm all alone, and he would tell them tortoise stories until they reached the farm. On their way back, he would sit them in front of his bicycle. And upon arriving home, how the stepmother and her children would grow envious as soon as they saw them together. But father never gave them the chance to disrespect Dora, except in his absence. And they started to weep. Then they thought about the little girl from the future. They fantasized about how they would both go out together after she was finally theirs, and how they wouldn't hesitate to tell whoever cared to listen that she was their daughter. They remembered how many times she came to their rescue when they had no hope of survival. The more Dora thought about these things, the more difficult making a choice was. "Are you okay?" the king asked all of a sudden, breaking Dora out of their thoughts. "Oh, yes. Yes. I'm fine," Dora said, wiping their tears with the back of their hand. "Can I ask for something?" Dora said to the old man, raising a finger in the air. "I will make a choice, but please allow me to see my father and talk to him before I do so." "Okay then, the choice is yours," said the old man. He then pointed at a bush path that connected to the neighboring village, and all of a sudden, Dora's father appeared on that path, wearing pure white attire. "Father!" Dora screamed and then ran to him with arms wide open. "Dora!" he called, with arms already spread for a hug. He was looking so fresh with smooth skin and also looked younger than he was. "How come? How was I summoned?" he asked with all seriousness. "They helped me," Dora said, pointing in the direction of the old man and the others. They hugged tightly, not letting go. After the hug, he grabbed Dora's face and looked into it while dropping a tear. "I used to come visit you, even tell you things sometimes, but you didn't always hear me. I can't count how many times I've stood by your bed till dawn, watching you cry your eyes out. And it really hurt not being able to help even when I wanted to. I really wished to, but I couldn't, because your stepmother tied me down until I was completely chased away from you when the native doctor revealed to her that I was still coming to visit you," he said, and Dora's jaw dropped in awe. They stared at him, trying to comprehend what they had just heard. "I don't understand that last line. Can you make me understand, please?" Dora said, eyes still glued to him. He sighed, then looked away, and then back at Dora. "Dora, your stepmother went to visit a native doctor who lives in a faraway land just to tie me down. She knew I was going to help you out of your situation somehow because of the bond we shared, and she also confirmed it from the native doctor that I was going to help. So she was asked to buy a male doll, which represented me. The doll was tied with a small chain and then buried." "What did that mean?" Dora asked, still staring at him. "It meant that I would no longer be able to help you," he revealed, and Dora bowed their head and started to shed tears again. Dora didn't know why their stepmother hated them so much to that extent. "Can I tell you a secret?" he asked, and Dora nodded. "She killed me," he said, and Dora's jaw dropped again in awe, with eyes now wide open. "You can't be serious," Dora said to him. "She killed me because she thought I loved you more than her children, so she had my food poisoned." As soon as Dora heard that, their whole body began to shiver. "What?" they exclaimed, trembling. "So unbelievable," they added, so shocked. "Father, you have no idea what I have been through," Dora said, almost falling at his feet. But he grabbed them up immediately. Dora explained everything they had been through, and their father stood there dumbfounded. Dora told him about the turn of events and also how they were told to choose between him and the little girl from the future, and his response was thrilling. "Are they the ones?" he first asked, pointing at them. "Yes," Dora replied with nods. "Don't tell me you're this senseless. So you don't know who to choose between us both?" "Oh, Dora, I am pained and highly disappointed," he let out, and Dora stood there confused. "Father, I'm so sorry. Honestly, I had you in mind as soon as I was told to choose between you both," Dora said, but he immediately cut in. "Listen, Dora," he said, grabbing Dora's shoulders and staring into their eyes. "I have lived my life, and it's time to give your little daughter a chance to live hers." "What?" Dora asked with teary eyes. "Yes, I know you love me so much and would want to have me back again, but I'm sorry. I have lived my life. Let the child come to life," he repeated, and Dora fell on their knees before him. Their father blessed them, and after a while, he left, bidding farewell forever. Dora went back to the old man, who was still standing there, waiting for their response on who to choose. "My daughter, the girl from the future," Dora said, still sobbing, and Neon immediately smiled. "And so, shall it be?" the old man screamed with hands up in the air. Immediately there was lightning and a sound of thunder from nowhere. Suddenly, Nenny and her grandmother appeared with the little girl from the future, while Nenny's grandmother gripped the little girl by the neck. The little girl was struggling to free herself from the old woman's grip, but seemed powerless now. The old woman and Nenny stood there, gnashing their teeth, while smoke was coming out of their eyes. "How dare you!" the old man raged in anger. His voice was so loud that the echoes travelled afar. Nenny's grandmother burst into a devilish laughter, then paused all of a sudden, and started to stare at everyone one after the other. "How dare you! I command you to let the little girl go now," the old man repeated. Nenny and her grandmother burst out in laughter. "Were you not informed that your era has come to an end? A more powerful river being has taken over," said Nenny's grandmother with a devilish smile. "It's still my son. You don't have to remind me of that. Now let the little girl go before you face my wrath." raged the old man. "You think you're the only powerful river god on this earth? You lie. I have journeyed through all the water kingdoms on this earth and come across even more powerful ones than you. I have rendered the little girl powerless, and now I'm taking her with us to start our own kingdom somewhere very far away," the old woman said, then gave a thunderous laugh. "You have dared me enough," thundered the old man. He stretched forth his arm towards the old woman, but she returned whatever the man was trying to send to her by stretching forth one of her arms towards Dora. Right before their eyes, something like a black cloud hit Dora, causing her to fall face down into the river. That was the last thing she remembered. After some time, Dora found herself tied down inside a room filled with water. She didn't know how she managed to survive under the water. Nani and her grandmother appeared before her and began to mock her. "Come on, the river god's special daughter-in-law, I bow before you," Nani mocked, and they both burst out laughing again. "Please let me go. I promise never to go close to Neon or have anything to do with his father or the river ever again," Dora pleaded. The old woman turned and looked at Nani, and they burst out laughing so hard this time. "My dear, what you have here is your soul. Your body is in Neon's arms right now, and I can see him crying uncontrollably," she said. But Dora didn't understand what she meant. "I don't understand," Dora said with their mouth agape. "Oh, you don't? You're going to be dead in a few minutes. I brought your soul here so that once you're finally pronounced dead, your soul automatically becomes mine and you become my water slave." "What?" Dora exclaimed, looking around scared. "Please, I beg of you. I want to go back." "It is too late. Can't you see how you have brought back my pain? I thought I had lost my son and that stupid girl whom he once impregnated so I could claim Nani, whom I single-handedly raised. Now, what have you done? You didn't only bring back that useless boy who calls himself my son, but you brought along the girl. Mama, I am sorry. Please have mercy. I never knew all this," Dora pleaded, already in tears. "Keep quiet," the old woman thundered. "Look around you," she said, and Dora turned and looked around again. No one, not even the water god and his son, can locate this place. I swam beyond all the seas in Africa to possess the kind of power I now have, and not even the water god can challenge me now," she said. "You only have a few minutes left," as she said. "Would you like to see your daughter from the future so that you both can talk about the things you would have done together if this didn't happen?" asked Nani, laughing. Dora nodded frantically. "Yes, yes, please, allow me to see her for the last time," Dora pleaded. Nani disappeared and reappeared after a few seconds with the girl. "Last time? Definitely not the last. You both remain here with me," said the old woman. As soon as the little girl saw Dora, she removed her hand from Nani's tight grip and ran towards Dora's already opened arms. "I missed you, but not to worry. Everything is under control," the little girl whispered in Dora's right ear. "So, get talking. What would you like to talk about?" asked the old woman. "Nothing. There's nothing to talk about," said the little girl. Then she walked back to Nani. "Perfect. Once your mother from the future's body finally dies, you both automatically become my slaves," said the old woman to the little girl. "If it is right before you and before anyone who can differentiate between good and evil, then let your wish come to pass," the little girl said, then gave her hand to Nani, who grabbed it in anger. "I have surrendered myself to you. Do with me as you please," said the little girl to Nani. "Henceforth, You and your mother from the future become my slaves. You will do as I say and only do whatever I want. You will no longer listen to anyone but me, and will no longer hear anyone's voice but mine," the old woman thundered, and Nenny turned and looked at her. Dora started to feel strange, as if air was penetrating their skin. "I don't understand how I feel. I feel strange," Dora said, looking at herself. "Yes? It means you're already on the verge of giving up. Your soul is totally leaving your body. That's why you feel that way," said the old woman with a devilish grin. "I can't allow you to continue doing this," Nenny said, with her head bowed. Dora became more confused, wondering what she was up to this time. She looked up suddenly, now facing her grandmother. "Enough is enough," Nenny said, giving her grandmother a very devilish look. Nenny's grandmother turned and looked around to see if there was someone else around that Nenny was referring to, but when she found no one, she looked back at Nenny. "What do you mean?" she quizzed, staring at Nenny. "I said, enough is enough. Enough of all your evil deeds. Enough of how you have manipulated me since childhood till now. Enough of you turning me into your slave so I can always do whatever you please. You never taught me anything about good deeds or kindness. All you taught me was one form of evil after another. Other children's lives have beautiful meanings, but look at mine. I wake up each day thinking of one evil or another. I am tired of this kind of life and I need my parents now. Enough of all you've done to ruin people's lives, grandmother. You should take a break now," Nenny yelled. Dora found it difficult to believe that it was actually Nenny standing before her, challenging her grandmother. Her mouth was wide open for a few seconds before they finally closed it when she realized it. "You dare challenge me after all I have done for you," her grandmother raged in anger. "You've done no meaningful thing in my life, Grandma. I'm fed up at this point. I don't want to live this kind of life anymore." "Oh, I see you have grown wings. You are just like your foolish and ungrateful parents. If I knew that one day you would turn against me after all I have done for you, I would have sacrificed you in exchange for more powers," said the grandmother, now biting her lower lip. "Grandma, please let these ones go," Nenny pleaded, but the old woman looked directly at her scornfully. "I am not your grandmother," the old woman yelled, pointing at Nenny. Suddenly, Nenny fell directly to the ground with blood dripping from her eyes, but since they were in water, the blood dissolved quickly. "I cease to be your grandmother, Nenny," raged the old woman. Dora was shocked at what she was beholding and screamed. The little girl ran to them and covered their mouth, preventing her from screaming, but she was visibly shaking. "I have already wasted my own granddaughter. So who are you both to be left alive? I think I should get rid of you both too." As soon as Dora heard that, she grabbed the little girl and hugged her tightly. The old woman turned swiftly, now facing east, and began to lament in tears, speaking in a language Dora didn't understand. Suddenly, Dora saw Nenny's hand move, but didn't say anything. Say didn't know how it happened, but the normal her wouldn't see a thing like that, and decide to keep calm the way she did that particular day. She sat there with arms around the little girl and eyes glued to Nenny, wanting to see what she was up to. The hand moved again and again, and the head also started moving. But Dora still kept her cool while the old woman was still there, speaking whatever it was that she was speaking. All of a sudden, Nenny disappeared while lying on the ground, and then reappeared after a few seconds, carrying a white calabash, now staring at the old woman who was still facing east and speaking to herself, while blood dripped from Nenny's eyes. the old woman noticed that something wasn't right. She turned swiftly, and as soon as she saw Nenny and what she was carrying, she started waving her hands with wide eyes. "No, no, don't you dare," she said, waving her hands. But Nenny then turned and looked at the little girl and Dora. "Get up and go home," she said, and immediately Dora stood up. "You're going nowhere," thundered the old woman. Nenny pointed in a direction, and immediately the water parted, showing them a straight road still inside the water. "That will lead you home," she said. And just as Dora was about to run out of there, the old woman roared in anger, causing Dora to pause. Nenny raised the white calabash above her head and then looked at the little girl and Dora. "Go! You will have all your powers back, little one," she said, and they immediately ran into the road, but she paused again. To do what, you may ask? Well, she wanted Nenny to see her parents. She knew that the calabash she was carrying wasn't an ordinary one, so she wanted to see what she would do with it and how it would affect her grandmother. She was willing to take that risk just for Nenny. She had already helped her, so she felt it was time to reciprocate. Nenny smashed the calabash, and immediately her grandmother fell to the ground, holding her chest. But she managed to look up, stretch forth her arm towards them, and a thick cloud emerged and started rolling like a ball towards her. Nenny again dived, and the ball hit her chest. Immediately, she fell lifeless to the ground. "No!" Dora screamed and ran to her. Dora quickly carried her in her arms, and when the old woman sent another ball, the little girl hit it and sent it back to her. She turned and looked at the little girl, and what she saw sent chills down her spine. Flames were coming out of her, and she smiled, looking back at her. "My power is back," she said with a grin, and she smiled back. Well, she was still carrying Nenny in her arms, while the old woman was still there, battling for her life. The little girl grabbed her shoulder, and immediately, she appeared before the river god and the other people present before she left. She was told to quickly go back into her body, which she did after dropping Nenny before her parents. Well, Nenny didn't die, and she reunited with her parents. Neon and Nenny later got married after she turned down Neon's proposal. Neon's father didn't go back. He started living in the river again, and he was always going to visit all of them sometimes. And the little girl became his. People came from far and wide to seek solutions to their problems from her, as well as bringing sick people to her, and she cured them all. She was highly respected around there, and ever since she came around, it had been from one gift to another. Remember Dale? Well, they got married, and there was nothing in life that she lacked anymore. From peace of mind to money to a good life, etc. Indeed, there is no gain in evil.